Hey, Todd, is that mic on out there? Huh?
Stephanie, did that get taken care of? Okay, so thank you all for coming. We will start our meeting off with an invocation by Mary Lee Tanner, after which Wesley Warren will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll come up, if the green light is not on, there's a button in the center. The green light's on? Okay, thank you.
Our dear and kind Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet together with the city and talk about the needs and wants, and that we can try to address them and work together as best as we possibly can. Grateful for the many blessings we've been given, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Everyone stand, I suppose. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, for those of you that are interested, last time I checked, Gonzaga was 20 points ahead, so no worries. WCC will do well. All right. We now have unscheduled public appearances, so that is for any item on the agenda that is not a public hearing. You're welcome to come up and share your thoughts for 3 minutes. There's only one item on the agenda that is a public hearing, and that's item 4. Everything else is an action item or discussion. So if you have comments on anything, please feel free now to spend 3 minutes and talk at us. State your name when you come up so that we know who you are.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Lowell Nelson. I've lived in Highland nearly 30 years, and I'm here tonight to address item 3B, B as in Bravo, on the consent calendar. The fact that this item is on the consent calendar means this item is already down the road quite a ways, and I don't know whether it can be changed at this point. But I'm here to express my opinion. I don't like vote by mail. I think there's a tremendous loss of integrity in our elections when we do vote by mail, and so I'm criticizing the Utah legislature, who last year in 2020 passed HB 36, which said that all elections will be conducted primarily by mail. Well, bad on them for doing that. I don't think that's the direction we need to go. And so this is somewhat related. We're going to ask Utah County to help conduct our election. Well, I remember back 10, 15 years ago, I was a poll watcher right here in this building, and I got to watch the people who are counting the ballots the night after the election, and I was so impressed at how they did that. One lady sat at the end of the table, and she had a poll tallier on either side of her. She was the one to handle the ballots. The talliers watched her. She would read the name of the candidate who received the vote. The talliers would make a mark on their paper, and whenever they reached a multiple of 5, they would say, okay, 25 for Joe Schmo, or 30 votes for this candidate here. And the other tallier would say, yes, I agree. And I was so impressed with the integrity in that election. They received the ballots all during that day. Everybody who came in identified himself or herself, and they signed in, they knew exactly how many, 500 people or 400 people, how many ever voted that day. And then they counted the ballots, and they did it so methodically that there was no question in my mind that the election was fair and it had integrity. And I just think that voting by mail is not the way to go. So what can we do? Well, we can persuade our legislators to reverse the direction. Let's decentralize our election process. Let's grassroots citizens maintain control of our elections instead of the centralization direction that is going right now. So thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you. Next. Hi, Mark.
My name is Mark Allen, representing Protected Preserve American Fork Canyon and a citizen of Utah County. I have to say that the gentleman that runs your camera stuff over here, that does your little humorous things, is amazing. I wish we had every city doing that. Thank you. Typically, I'm one of the 6 on YouTube watching your meetings, and we need more citizen participation, but that makes your 4-hour meetings. He can scale it down to 60 seconds. I'm grateful for that. I would like to read, I'm here to talk about the Equestrian Center, and I'd just like to quote what you said, Mayor Mann, in January 5th, because I'm in total, complete support of what you said. I told Tony I do not want to get into a war with my neighboring mayors. It's important for us to have good relationships. So I put the onus on him to talk to Mayor Johnson and Frost independently to sell them on the idea of we could do this rec center plus what you want to do. I've talked with Mayor Frost and Mayor Johnson. The City of American Fork created a resolution to protect in contiguous form the 37 acres. I've got a copy of the resolution that I'd like to give to each of you here. There is a proposal by the City of American Fork and Lehigh, and I would encourage the City of Highland to work with your neighboring mayors and create a citizens working group. I talked to Tony as well, and I said I support your rec center idea, just not here. It's the wrong piece of property. I did a little due diligence. Tony's Community Development Partners LLC expired in November of last year. Thought you ought to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Come on, go ahead.
Hard to see if there's anybody behind me. Christy Henshaw, and I just wanted to second that the Utah Highlander videos are the greatest things. And I tell everybody I can about them because they're wonderful and keep everybody up to date. And thank you guys for your service and everything that you do. I would like to talk, as Lowell did, on the consent item 3B. I think a lot of you had seen I sent an email today just kind of putting out. So the funny thing was, last city council meeting, when the county was presenting, all of a sudden, like, things clicked, and I went, oh my gosh, that's why. So I tried to lay it out as best as I could, sequentially in order, just saying, hey, these are the pieces. You know, oftentimes in government, we don't see the piece of our section, and then after a little time and space passes, and we stand back and we go, oh, that's how it all worked together. So I felt like I had one of those moments, not fully with enough time and space between it to say this is how it will all play out, but it certainly has the potential. And so my hope was to lay out the potential of what could happen. You know, whether you are a proponent or an opponent of ranked choice voting, it was interesting during the legislative session to watch the ranked choice voting legislation. And we looked at those bills to see why aren't they getting pushed through? They got so much attention on city levels and they weren't getting pushed through. And then when the county was here last week, it kind of made sense because they said to you guys, hey, $27,000 for a single ballot election or $60,000 if you want to do a primary. But hey, here's the other way you can get around that, ranked choice voting. Then it brings you back down to $27,000. And I kind of went, maybe that's why. I don't know. I really don't know if that's why. But it did seem like it was an easy way to force cities into a financial decision to go in a direction that looked like it was supported by a lot of other organizations. So I wanted to point that out. I don't know where all of you guys stand on that. I do think that election integrity is one of the greatest things that we can guard, especially on a city level. And I know they're a pain. They're a pain to do, they're a pain to administer, and I think we've realized as citizens that we should have been more involved. There's citizen councils that could help and volunteers that could be there to ease the burden on the city. And so I'm hoping that tonight you guys will take a look at this again if it already hasn't been decided, and see if this is something that we really value in Highland City as something that should be protected, even if it does take some more time and some money and resources from us. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, you're obligated to say something nice about Utah's Highlander.
Oh, am I? He's awesome. I'll be married to him for 27 years in a couple weeks. So, Wendy Hart, and of course, elections, I am here. I agree with what Lowell and Christy have said. I don't think there is anything more important that we can concern ourselves with at this moment in time other than election integrity. And the way we do that is by separating out powers. I understand that it's a lot easier, especially when everyone around you and all the powers that be are saying, this is what we want to do, we have the resources, the county can do it, it's no big deal. But I'm here to tell you, in 3 to 5 years, I think it's going to be a big deal. I think it was a big deal 2 years ago when the city went with the county. And I think that's what precipitated, in part, where the legislature ended up. The idea is that we can consolidate things. It may be more efficient, but our system of government was not designed to be efficient. It was designed to maintain freedom, and that means that we're not efficient. You know, you can get 98% of the vote in a dictatorship. That's really not what we're looking for. We're looking for separation of powers. And as I mentioned in my email, yes, you can count the votes, but the ultimate goal is not just to have tallies on a piece of paper to say that this is who won. It's also to have the consent of the governed. It's to involve the community, and it's to have the people feel and participate in their government, not just to be checking the box, I voted for this person, but to be truly informed and involved. And we lose that, and we lose part of our community. And I realize that I'm putting a lot of burden on our city recorder and staff by requesting this, but I'm here to volunteer all of my efforts to assist in that direction. As I said in the email, I could do my kids' math homework, and you would get the right answers on the paper. But the end goal is not for those right answers to be on the paper. The end goal of city elections is not to have the right answers on the paper. The end goal of city elections is the consent of the governed via separation of powers and checks and balances. And that is more important, and I'm willing to extend whatever efforts I can to do so. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm Kristen Chevrier, and I also like the Highlander. It's much more fun than 4 hours of meetings. So I just wanted to talk just a little bit about 3B on the consent calendar as well. My concerns are that local is best, especially in a world of uncertainty that, like what we're in right now, where we don't know who we can trust. But if we can have the ballots here and do our own counting and control at least that element of the election, I think that would be helpful. I like the fact that it's actually cheaper to do it on our own. I'm not a fan of vote by mail. I never have been. I've always argued against vote by mail. I think that it's too easy for it to be taken advantage of and too susceptible to fraud. I think that we need to maintain primaries in order to facilitate the grassroots and allow people who are not wealthy or connected, powerfully connected, to be able to run for office, because anybody can go door to door to door and talk to everyone if they have enough time. And I think the primary gives them enough time to do that. Also, with making a decision of whether to go to the county, having the taking care of the elections or are taking care of the elections, I don't think that we should be pressured into a decision by a timeline set by somebody outside of the city. I think we should take whatever time we need. And then my last thought is that once we give power away, it's hard to get it back. And giving power to the county now could end up being giving power to the state for the next step. Right now, we have the county as a buffer. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thanks for letting me say something. My name is Holly Hopkins. I just wanted to come because on the agenda is included that you're going to talk later about the possible sale of some parkland to a private developer. And I just wanted to encourage you as Highland City Council members to consider the idea that sorry, let me read this because so it sounds clear. I'd like to encourage Highland City to join with American Fork and Lehigh to share the costs of a 37-acre public park. And then I wanted to tell you there's a Tri-City golf course that American Fork partners with 2 other cities in. They partner to share the cost of that golf course. They have a little committee that works with the cities, and the committee's job is to figure out what's the best, how can we make the best golf course possible? And we could have a little committee for the equestrian park to say, how can we make this the best equestrian park possible? And work with the cities in that. Let me see, there was something else. Oh yes, it can benefit all 3 city residents. The cost of maintaining an equestrian park could be shared by all 3 cities, just like maintaining the golf course is currently shared by 3 cities. There are benefits to all 3 cities in this approach because it would be public land used by all 3 cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Sherry Kramer. I've lived in Highland for the last 9 years, and before that I lived in American Fork for 15. And I'd like to also say something about the County Equestrian Park that is on the agenda tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and read it so I don't forget anything. About 20 years ago, myself and many of my neighbors petitioned the American Fork Mayor and City Council for parks and open space in the area of American Fork, in this area of American Fork. After many months of meeting and going door to door with petitions, we were able to successfully convince the council to use some city-owned land in this area, and it became Hunter Park. A few years later, before it was finished, 2 different developers tried to convince the city to swap part of that land and some open space land near the equestrian park for road access for the 1120 North connection. The residents again rallied and convinced the city not to trade it. Hunter Park was eventually finished, and our group of neighbors raised over $20,000 in the process. That money was used to build the tot lot at Hunter Park. I was recently made aware that the county has been looking into possibly selling the equestrian park to help balance their budget, which was actually balanced recently thanks to the COVID relief money they received. But the idea of selling public land to balance a budget seems like a short-sighted solution to a long-term budgeting problem to me. The 37-acre piece of public land, along with American Fork's 27 acres of parkland and open space, make up this big, beautiful natural area that is one of the few mostly untouched open space areas in the surrounding communities, and it's public land. This area will become even more needed and valued by the community as time goes on. Our cities will eventually reach build-out, and there won't be open spaces left except areas like this that have been designated as open space by the cities or the county. These open space areas will also become more appealing for development as land prices continue to go up and land becomes more scarce. Please do not sell it for development or for a private indoor soccer facility or any other kind of development. This land belongs to you and I and everyone who lives in this community. Please choose a plan that will keep the equestrian park the beautiful open space area that our communities love and have worked so hard for. There are other options for keeping the equestrian park maintained, and American Fork has suggested just a few. Please work together as cities and keep this area open space as it was envisioned to be. You can put an indoor soccer facility in many different locations, but our community can't get open space like this back once it's gone. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time.
Good evening, and thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ann Boyle. I own a home in Highland, but I live in American Fork, so I think I pay taxes in both. I also hear about the equestrian park. I don't own a horse, but I use the park every single day. I am not sure how familiar all of you are with the park, but the lower section, the 6.5 acres that the developer is trying to purchase, is the portion of the park where I bring my grandchildren to play. I brought my kids there when they were growing up. I bring my grandkids there. There is nothing more fun than an empty lot to a bunch of boys that can just run wild all over it. We have 2 playgrounds. We have 4 pavilions. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the 4 pavilions carry the names of the entities that developed and built this park. One says Utah County, one says Highland, one has Lehigh, one has American Fork. This is something fantastic that we created together, 3 cities and the county. We put this thing together. I was part of watching it grow. We used to go by every day with excitement for when it would open. I know it makes me seem very old now. It was more than 20 years ago. But we have used this park. Just because you don't have a horse doesn't mean you can't use it. My kids and my grandkids now like to watch for the horses going by, like people on safari look for wild animals. It's crazy to me that they're growing up in an urban area where they don't get to see horses, except when I take them to the park. We love the community that use this park. We love all the people that we meet when we go there. I'm not against Tony Johns and his private rec center that he wants to build, but he admitted at his hearing here that it was not something that should be put in a residential neighborhood. And I agree with him, but that park is in a residential neighborhood. And every time I walk there, I can feel myself relax just watching the birds and just listening to the peace and quiet. And I would invite any of you that can to come and just walk in this open space and see how fabulous it is. And Mayor Mann, I just would really, really encourage you to please not work with the developer to take away our public space that belongs to all of us, but rather to purchase his land from a private entity where it is for sale. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Lee Tanner. Jemima and I are kind of a package deal. We have done it, but I'm a Highland resident, just for reference, and Jemima is American Fork resident.
Yeah. So I wrote down notes too, because I will forget. So Mary Lee and I are the founders of Save North Utah County Equestrian Park. We hosted a town hall with Commissioner Lee last Tuesday with close to 100 attendees. It was unanimously agreed that both the horse community and surrounding neighbors would like to see the park remain intact and undeveloped. We want to thank Tony Johns for his efforts in wanting to help fund and improve the park, which desperately needs to happen. He has truly tried to hear those concerns from the horse community. Though we feel the community has strongly expressed their concern over the possible development, and we strongly support the park preservation. We ask that you consider the concerns of the citizens of not only Highland, but the surrounding cities and users of the park. We would like to encourage the cities to work together to help make the equestrian park the jewel of the north end of the county, something that generations to come will be able to enjoy.
And just to add to that, we as the horse community, both of us ride at the equestrian center too and use it often. As the horse community, we want to be a part of the solution and to helping we would encourage the Highland to go with the other cities and help run it. And as a horse community, we want to step up and help make solutions. Even just in the last weekend, those who want to keep the equestrian center, we threw out and said, those who are willing to pledge money to help the cities to improve this equestrian park. We've already had $40,000 worth of people who have pledged money for it. And this is just from last Friday. So what we're trying to say is that we're not just here to ask for you guys. We're here to offer our help and say we want to help make this equestrian center something that it could be in the North End. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Going once, twice, sold. So Ernie, you're up to bat. Thank you for those that presented. We appreciate you coming. Ernie is going to talk to us about water. So if you're, please stay and at least listen to him if no one else tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Ernie John, not to be confused with Tony Johns. It is John with no S. I'm the President Water Master of American Fork Irrigation Company, and per court decree from the turn of the century, not the last one, the one before that, American Fork Irrigation Company manages American Fork Canyon for the 3 irrigation companies that the water's developed at the mouth of the canyon. That would be Lehigh Irrigation, American Fork Irrigation, Pleasant Grove Irrigation. So I have a presentation. Aaron? Oh, good. Let's see if this is going to work. To the right? Okay, there we go. So what I want to talk about tonight is, I'm not going to read every slide. I think that's a little redundant, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Please, anyone hold your hand up or holler at me, and if you have a question, let's get it answered as I go along. So there we go. Oh boy, that's not really good. It's going to be a challenge tonight, I can tell. Okay. What we're trying to look at, I'm going to start with, I think as everyone knows, right again? Okay, there we go. The governor issued an emergency drought order because of the drought condition we're in. This is a U.S. drought monitor as of this week, and it shows for the state of Utah that Utah County, the majority of Utah County, is in exceptional drought. That is number 4. It doesn't get much worse than that. Aaron, how do I do the laser pointer? Is it the green button? Circle in the middle? Okay. There we go. This is 92 years of history of American Fork Canyon's water flows. There's a few years in here from 2006 to 2010 that the gauge station was broke. But other than that, we've got 92 years of history for the canyon. And if you look at the last 10 years, that's from right here to this point to here, we've had 2 normal years, and the remainder, all of them are drought years. Make no bones about this. We're in dire straits. Aaron, there you go, okay. I'm going to go again through some data fairly quickly. This is the soil moisture level. We've tracked this in the state of Utah for the last 16 years. It happens to be the lowest in 16 years that we've tracked the levels. There are 2 sites that we use to measure the snow up high in American Fork Canyon. This one sits at Timp Divide, right between us and Provo Canyon. If you look right there, that is today's date where those lines end. That line right there shows a snow water equivalent where we should be, or where we are, and that shows where we should be. We're about 50% of normal for the Timpanogos Divide snowtail site. The next site that I use is over the top in Little Cottonwood Canyon. It's a snowbird site. It sits on the south side of the canyon, so it's north facing. It's at a little over 60%, but it gives me an idea of what the higher elevation is. This one sets at 9,200 feet elevation. Unfortunately, we have a lot of our canyon is south facing, south and west facing. These are pictures I took this morning up at Tibble Fork. If you look at the lower left corner where that laser pointer is, that is at 7,000 feet elevation. And if you notice, there's no snow there. That peak is to the east of Tibble Fork, and it's at almost 9,000 feet, and again, there's virtually no snow there. This is just a quick, there we go. This is a quick synopsis of the canyon. Tibble Fork sets at 6,400 foot elevation, Silver Lake Flats at 7,500 foot elevation. The short answer is we're going to be below 50% of our normal canyon drainage for this year. We could be as low as 30%. In the last 10 years, one of those years was number 4 in 92 years. We was afraid it was going to be number 3. I suspect that this might be number 3 if it shows the way it's continues the way it's going. This is the American Fork River flows last year. If you look, looks like I'm not going to get back, Aaron. Basically, it was showing that our flows last year were below normal. The year before we peaked out, if you notice right there, we peak at 200 CFS. Cubic foot a second is 450 gallon a minute. We had 200 CFS. Year before, we had 650 CFS. That's about where we start to flood. So the year before, we touched on flooding. This is showing currently as of today and this week. If you look at the average, we should be about 22 or 23 CFS. We're 11. Highland City gets 65% of its annual PI water from the American Fork Canyon River. The projected runoff again is 50 to 30% of average. We're in our second year of a severe drought. We've had 2 normal years in the last year, and the soil moisture is the lowest it's been in 16 years. Here's my recommendation to the City Council. This is your decision on how you want to do it. I did do this in concert with some input from Todd Train and from Jeff Murdoch, who runs your PI system. This is what American Fork's doing. I made a presentation to them just before this meeting for their work session today. If you do a voluntary, the normal PI system starts on the 15th of April. That's the normal date that the system's up and operational and people can start using water. If people would voluntarily, and this is everyone, citizens, commercial, residential, the city, Alpine School District, and the churches would hold off watering their lawns until the 1st of May, what it would do is it would allow the water in the canyon to catch up, because early season Highland, like American Fork, has to pull in additional water from the CUP or from Deer Creek, from the Murdoch Canal, to boost the system in the springtime. It's cool in the springtime. This is a perfect time to let your lawns get a little stressed. We need that 80 CFS, or that 80 acre feet of water that we can save for August and September. Otherwise, we're going to be running really low on water. I sat on the American Fork Water Management and Conservation Committee. We're developing a 5-stage plan for American Fork. If you would like that, we could share that with you, Mayor. But basically, rather than have to enact every time we come to you multiple times during the year and say the water's getting less than we expected or even lower, that it would allow you to enact one time, and it would have various points, 5 points that you could say we're at this point, and you would be able to then go to the residents with either voluntary, mandatory restrictions. It gives you a lot of options to do that, and we talked a lot about that in our work meeting today. So if you'd like a copy of that, I can get that for you.
That'd be great.
That pretty well ends my presentation. The short answer is we don't have a lot of water coming out of the canyon this year, and so we need to conserve every little bit we can.
So I, just as an addendum to this, I met with the mayors of North Utah County on Friday, and we all agreed that this would be something we should do. Evidently, the school district is on board. The church is on board for all the churches up here in North County.
Yes.
And so, and Jeff and Todd are supportive of this. So I think we're on board. We also funded a video project to reinforce the message. Those of you that like Utah's Highlander will be glad. We'll be using him to do videos to encourage people to save water. And he agreed to help there, so.
I think it's important that we're all together with this in North Utah County because it affects all of us to one degree or another. There's not a single one of us that have excess water. With the growth that we've had and with 8 out of 10 years of drought, we now need to be able to encourage our residents, and I hope that we don't have to get to the point where we're have mandatory restrictions. That's not a great hope, but it's a hope. I hope that you can get the message out, and I think that that's going a long ways toward the mayors working together to get the word out to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have a question of Ernie? So, Ernie, are you recommending that we do not fill our PI ponds until May 1st, or would we fill them as the water's coming in from, if it starts the 10th, we're filling them, but we're not pressurizing the system? Is that?
No, we'd actually fill them on the 15th. The plan is to put water in the system to start to fill it on the 5th. And that way by the 15th it would be full and pressurized. But we would ask all the residents, commercial, everyone in the city to please hold off watering their lawns. Now we know that there's a lot of horse people that need to water pastures. We understand that people put gardens in, that you don't want to lose your trees. But if you just hold off watering your lawns until the 1st of May, then what that would allow us to do is not pull in that additional water that we have to pull in. So the system would be charged, it would be able to be used, but it's a voluntary restriction on lawns alone.
Scott Smith, I just have a question here. So you say we're in dire straits and different things, but when I went to work today, there's water going down the American Fork River channel.
That is correct. So
and do we have to let so much water go down the channel? Why can't we conserve all of that if we're in such dire straits? Because that just goes down to the lake, doesn't it?
That's correct. It does go down the lake. 2 reasons. One is, the first is we don't have any way to store that amount of water. That's one. It would take a couple of Silver Lake flats right down here at the mouth of the canyon to store water. And then the second one is our water rights. Our water rights were established around the turn of the 19th century, and we're allowed to start filling on April 1st, and then our official season starts on April 15th. So that's a water right that we get from the state of Utah.
So starting tomorrow, you can start filling things. Is that what you're saying?
We can start filling things, but we're still doing repairs. We will be pressurizing the system, testing the system, flushing the irrigation ditches. We're doing that this week in all the cities. So we will be using the water, but it will be flowing in and out of the river channel until the 5th, and at that point we put it into the ponds, the irrigation ponds, to feed the systems and start to charge the systems.
So I understand that, but it just seems like we're wasting water when we don't have any water to waste.
We don't have the ability to capture the additional water. So these water rights were, again, from the early 1900s, late 1800s, and they were put in the ditches. It was a different time back then. So they were put in the ditches, and they would travel all the way from the mouth of the canyon clear down to Lehigh, and it would take them, 2 weeks to get there, a week and a half to get there. So that's why the water rights are there. Again, we don't have the ability to store that much water. Our ponds, our systems are predicated upon a cycle from day to night, that we usually fill them during the day and then they get used at night. So we could store additional water, but frankly we couldn't afford it. I mean, can you imagine trying to build a small Deer Creek at the mouth of the canyon?
So are our reservoirs up American Fork Canyon full, Tibble Fork?
No, again, the dates that I have to start to fill those are the April 15th. So I will start to fill Silver Lake Flat on April 15th. Because of the construction work that was done on Tibble Fork, we have a mandate from the Army Corps of Engineers. I will fill Tibble Fork later, but I believe we will have enough water to get both of those filled and then used. So on an average year, they're usually Silver Lake Flat is filled around the 15th of May is normally when it fills. Mm-hmm. And then I fill Tibble Fork around the 1st of June. On a good year, normal year, I don't usually start to drop water out of those until the latter part of July, toward the 1st of August. I fully expect that late June I will actually be draining those reservoirs and bringing that water down that soon in order to keep the levels up, to keep the cities, to keep the ponds full. All the cities have what's called late season or stored water. That's Deer Creek water and Jordanelle water. We take those through different aqueducts. There's different pipelines that come from the mouth of Provo Canyon. And all the cities have varying amounts of water. Highland City has water in both of those facilities. So what we try to do is allow them to fill during the early summer, early spring, midsummer, and that's kind of the last water use we want to pull in. We want to wait till the water canyon is tapering down, and we pick a point and say, okay, at this point we'll start to pull in additional water to keep our systems full.
So we have a new lake with Dry Creek Lake. Right here is Kurt.
Yes.
You have the Dry Creek Lake. What percentage of AF Canyon are you anticipating to go into the Dry Creek Lake? I know they have Dry Creek coming out of Alpine, and I think they have rights. Lehigh has rights until it's like July 1st or
July 1st, yeah.
And so they have rights to bring that water down through that Dry Creek. But then what percentage, and are they going to try to fill Dry Creek at all this year?
Dry Creek will naturally fill based upon the way the outlet structure is put, and it's going to fill. It won't be completed. The dam work and that, I do sit on that board that manages that reservoir also. That will be completed. The infrastructure on the Lehigh side won't be completed till later on in the year, but during the spring it will fill up. The percentage of the canyon water is very minor, and it is part of Lehigh Irrigation's rights, but Lehigh City has actually committed additional water to go into that to keep it full over the summertime out of their irrigation system.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ernie.
Appreciate it.
All right, we're on consent items. We have quite a few consent items. Are there any that you would like to pull for discussion?
I would like to pull item 3B for discussion.
Okay.
And Mayor, I'd like to pull item number 3D, 3E.
Okay, any other items?
I'd like to pull item 3I.
3I. Okay, so is there a motion on the remainder of the items, and then we can get to the individual
I move that
ones?
we approve the consent items number 3A, 3C, 3F, 3G, 3H.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kurt, second by Scott. Are we voting electronically today, Aaron? Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, let's start with 3B. Brittany.
Yeah, so this is the item about elections, and this one is really bothersome to me, and it was even maybe more bothersome after I heard the presentation last meeting. I think the county does a great job, and I appreciate them. I don't think that they are doing anything wrong or mismanaging money or manipulating ballots. I just think that elections are the most important thing that we do, and to pass that off to a higher level of government, I just don't think is a great idea. We would not want the state coming in to take over county elections or the federal government coming in to take over state elections. So I just think this one is important, and I don't think it should be only about efficiency and cost, because there are some things that are more important than that. A couple other things, though, going back to cost, I do find it frustrating that we didn't find out about this increased cost until a few weeks ago. You know, it's almost double what it was last time, so I feel like that is worth discussion. I also just thinking about the way that the county does it, it's a process that we as Highlanders have no input over, right? It will just be what the county wants it to be, and it's not like we can choose from a menu of services. It's like we take what they offer or we don't. So we don't have any control of how they pick up the ballots back here or they're counted or anything like that. And I do worry that when asked how we can cut costs with this, the answer is that we could do away with a primary election, which I think would be a mistake as well. Even though that took a lot of time and effort with signs for the primary, I think it would still be a negative. And we have to make this decision by tomorrow. They asked for the decision by the end of March, which is really quick. I would like more time to do some math. I know that when the county tax increase passed, the clerk auditor's office got about $1.8 million of the money from that property tax increase. So I would like a minute to just look over that. I think my last question would be that it seems like from our discussion last time that the main drawback to Highland doing their own elections is verifying signatures. In statute, it says the county has to provide us with those signatures, but there's not a way really for us to verify those, or at least that's what the county said. So I would be interested in knowing if every county had purchased fancy signature reading equipment, or if there's a training or how that process works to ensure that we couldn't do that on a local level. And then I wonder how long is it until we're gonna use like thumbprints or eyeballs or whatever. I just would like to come show you my driver's license and I'll vote in person. So I realize that at this point that doesn't really seem possible with staff, but I certainly would like to look into this for later. They don't give power back after they take it, then it's just gone.
So the hard date is April 15th for the decision. We have a work session on the 13th that's really full. Do you have any suggestions as to when we would meet and discuss, or what your alternatives are to us sending out and processing all mail-in ballots and signature verification?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I feel like it's not super practical for us as a city to say that we'll do that and make sure that we have a process that is safe and cost efficient and all of that. I'm not sure that our staff is able to do that like on the fly because that's so much work. I just think it's something that we need to pay attention to and not give away in the future. I would like to have a great discussion about how we could utilize volunteers, see if the state has a way that they can teach us how to do the signature verification if we're doing all vote by mail. I just think that there are lots of factors we could look into for another time. There's a comment.
So are you suggesting, Brittany, that perhaps we go with the county on this election and then make sure that we get all these questions answered and look into it, or try and do it before this election? I mean, it's a hard deadline of April 15th, which puts us in a jam because it doesn't give us enough time to be able to really verify all this information and do our research.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a feasible way. I've talked to Nathan. I don't know if there's a feasible way for us to do it for this election, but I am not willing to give it away indefinitely. I just think it's a mistake.
I think that's one of the hard things, though, is once you do it, it's hard to take back that power.
Yeah, and I think it would be fair to talk to our state legislators about the way they're legislating elections to make sure that it is empowering municipalities.
So let me ask a question, Brittany. I guess I'm a little confused about the logistics. I mean, I really support this idea of keeping the elections local, but would we have to print our own ballots, send them out? Because we've kind of been mandated by the state that we're going to have to do mail-in. I imagine we can make arrangements that people that want to vote in person could do that. I'm just wondering how we'd organize all of that in a short time, because I support staying locally too. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think we can do it this time in a short amount of time, but the county clerk's office is required to give us the current voter list, and they're required to provide us with the signatures. So I think the information is there for us to do later. I think the other problem, when I say we need to look at factors other than cost, I think we do, but we also have to look at cost, and from the research staff did for our last meeting, it seems like it would be more expensive to administer it ourselves this go-around. But I think that there has to be a way, if we're going to do signature verification indefinitely, wouldn't it make sense for cities to purchase the verifying equipment together, or for the county to like give us a menu of services and let us say, we'll collect our own ballots, we'll print our own ballots, but then can we schedule a time to use your machine to count or verify or something? I just think there are creative options that we should look at, but I don't think we have time to do it right now, unfortunately.
So maybe we can say, let's go ahead, go with the county this year, but I want to make it an action item that this is something that we work on and we discuss and we really give a lot of research to see what we can do to keep it within the city.
But this is for city municipal elections, so our next one is in 2023. So you're saying by then we could come up with a system better?
I hope so. It is government, so.
Or they'll come up with a new system.
Yeah.
That would give you time to lobby our representatives at state level to look into and address it as well. So as part of that, does somebody want to step up and
Well,
say,
this is a question. I have a couple other questions. So I thought when the county came last time, when we asked the question, could we have residents drop the ballots here in this ballot box, that we could do it, and then they would avoid, they'd allow us to come down and use those verification machines. Did I misunderstand that that was not an option, that the county's not allowing us to be able to run our own elections, and we have that as an option?
My understanding was that the option that they presented to us was what it was, and that there wasn't room for flexibility. Like, I asked if we could have an in-person polling location if we wanted to, and I was told no, not necessarily, like, no, we can't do that. They would think about it. And just even as a council member who has to certify these results, having some kind of visibility over how the ballot gets from that box to the county clerk's office, I think would be important. I mean, I think that Amelia has done a great job. I think that Utah County Elections runs really smoothly. I think they were a model for the entire country during this last election cycle. I just don't want to give this thing away.
So I guess this is a question for our attorney. If we decide to become a rebel council and we don't want to file, just get in line behind the state, what happens? Is it our election, or is it a county or state election? Who controls the election for Highland City? Could us as a council become rogue and go on our own? I understand there's a state thing. What happens if we say we're going on our own?
You know, Kurt, that is a great policy question, one I actually thought about on my drive down here today. You have the state law. The state controls elections. The issue could come up, say, Highland City decided to go completely rogue. We're going to run our own election. We're not going to do, even vote by mail. It's just going to be, we're going to hold a polling station in this, City Hall and maybe a couple other places. People can come in and do it. Who cares what the state code says? Obviously, I'm not going to recommend that. I can't as the attorney. The problems I see from it, we could easily get sued by the lieutenant governor of the state because she runs elections. She's in charge of it. They would probably issue an injunction, get a court order against the city to compel us to comply with it, subject to contempt of court. As a practical matter for candidates, say someone runs in a primary or as part of the election, loses. They also could sue the city and say, you didn't run this election the way it should have been run, and if you had, I would have won. There are numerous ways the city would lose, from the state, from candidates, from citizens who perhaps think, hey, I'm fine with vote by mail. I want the city to run the election the way the state law says to. Maybe you'd have other citizens who would support the city's actions. I mean, obviously you've heard from presenters earlier today regarding that. Defying the state in that way is a way to get yourself sued by a lot of people. And you would lose.
So I still also, so I appreciate you sharing. So we could go rogue. We take the risk of some suits, from the state, where they can come in, like you said, the bigger ones, maybe from some candidates. Now we look at the county. If we said we want to run our own election and have the county help process, is that not an option? I guess I thought that was an option. The county would help us, verify signatures, but we could run our own election.
I think that's correct, but then what is, this is my perspective, what is the difference then? You're still going to the county, they're verifying the signatures for us. So we've, to use a phrase I don't particularly agree with, that we've abrogated or abdicated that to the county. My view is it's being outsourced because we don't have a practical way to do that. And the way it works is you get a ballot, it has a signature on the outside. So before we could ever count it, we'd have to go to the county and have those signatures verified. And to me, that is just problematic because they come in, when we went to the county, we wouldn't have a priority. Their priority would be them first, and we would get second priority on all of that. And so our results we would just be really slow in getting the election results back, and we're still using the county for a vital part of this. We're not taking advantage of the automated counting machines they have to process ballots. So I just don't understand how we benefit or how it's any different in real practice than having them collect those ballots instead of us bring them to them.
Maybe we feel more in control. I'm just saying,
I understand it's feel is for me the operative thing. Maybe we feel more in control, but in practice, it's the same thing. And we're printing our own ballots. It will cost us money. $20,000, I think, is what the estimate was over what the county would charge us. And my understanding for those in the audience that are concerned about ranked choice voting or eliminating primaries, that is not the opinion of the council, nor the mayor. The mayor doesn't have a vote, but he is very opinionated on that's wrong.
Can I ask a question about that? So state law says that the election needs to be primarily done by mail. Have we defined primarily yet? And along with that, is there also a state statute related to signature verification, so that says that signatures have to be verified by like signature certifying professionals, or what's the standard related to signature verifying? Because I don't imagine that all these smaller counties have purchased the big signature verifying equipment.
So the first question, primarily by mail, that's the statutory phrase. It's later, the way the statute reads is after that it says you have to mail out a ballot to every person. So when they say primarily by mail, it's the recognition that you could mail out a mail-in ballot to every person in Highland, and no one has to turn it in. Everyone can still go into the one polling place the county will provide and vote in person. But you still have to send out that ballot to everyone, regardless of how many polling places you have. So that's the primarily by mail is, you give everyone the option to do mail-in ballot, and then they choose whether to do a mail-in ballot or not.
So my understanding is that if you come to a polling place, you're just taking a copy of that mail-in ballot. If you either bring yours or certify that you've lost it, and they give you the same thing, and then you fill it out and put it in an envelope and put it in a box. So it's the same thing, you're just doing that in person.
Yeah. With a mail-in ballot, then, we're also required to pay return postage, correct? Otherwise, it's a poll tax?
Yes, we have to provide them so that it is a free way for someone to vote.
So we really have an unfunded mandate here from the state government telling us how we need to locally run our elections.
Yes.
And then we have a monopoly by the county in how we run the election. So there actually is not really a choice.
Yep, your choice is do with the county or pay a lot more and still have to work with the county. And that was to your second question, which was, does the county have some obligation? They have certain obligations, and there's certain requirements for verifying signatures and how you go about doing that. You don't have to purchase a particular software or system to do it. The code even says, cities and counties are allowed to experiment and work on different ways as long as you meet standards for signature verification, and there's lots of requirements in the code. So we can go out and do that thing, and theoretically, cities could band together, and, you could have AF and Lehigh or whoever else, you all work together, and we come up with some kind of new system. We work with the county. The issue is you have to get certain things from the county, and the county will give us, signatures and voter registration records for us to use, but they don't have to do anything else by statute. So for the county to work with us, the county can say, we will give you what we're required to by statute. If you want more, here are our terms. And they are kind of in a monopolistic position. I would strongly recommend contacting the legislature, because that's the way to fix this, is the state code. Yeah.
Any other discussion on item B? Is there a motion relative to item B?
I mean, none of us want to make this motion because we don't want to do it. But it seems like this is the only thing we can do. And I guess it's kind of our plea to everyone, go contact your state representatives, because this is what it comes down to is, there are certain state statutes and a little bit of a monopoly with the county that is basically making us go this way.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just one quick comment, and that is, most of the comments have been negative toward this proposal. One possible positive would be that certain municipal functions are granted monopolies, such as power distribution or water. There is no competition because of the efficiencies that it creates. A small municipality such as Highland, I think Brittany made a point, and that is, are we capable of providing signature verification, et cetera, on this level? And perhaps we are not. And so this type of efficiency may be the best way to go, as long as we, like Kim mentioned, have the ability to bring it back in-house if need be. So is there a way to tap into this efficiency, and if it gets to a point that it's unacceptable to us, bring it back in-house?
And this contract is just for a year, right,
This is
for this
just
election?
for this election. We do have if any resident or council member would like to, they do let people do poll watching at the county. You can go down there. I've toured the facility, and they do allow people to watch, to fulfill that poll watching.
Can we do a proposal indicating that we will, well, it is just for a year, so we could bring it back if we so choose.
It's a year, so it doesn't extend beyond that.
So can we concurrently utilize those services and do a study on our own?
I don't know, why not?
Okay.
If nobody wants to make this motion, Kim, if you want to make the motion, I will second it, but then I will add a caveat on that I will spend my year trying to figure out a way that we can keep this local for next time, but I agree there's not a different way to do it now. So if you motion, I will second.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve consent item 3B, resolution authorizing Utah County to administer the 2021 municipal election.
And I will second.
A motion by Kim, second by Brittany, who is committing to spend her entire day outside of eating, drinking,
I'm going to have
sleeping.
all my students do a research project about mail-in elections in Utah.
I'll help you, Brittany, if there's
And it looks like the county's already voted for us up here.
So, yeah, okay. This is for item 3B. So we are now live and voting for 3B, and I appreciate you tempting me, Aaron, and helping to improve my self-control on using proper names.
I figure it makes our meetings more fun, Mayor.
Yes. Okay, so that passes 4-1. Next item is items D and E. Kurt.
So I pulled these, and it also kind of pertains to item number 5 also. So this pertains
Hey,
to,
Kurt, do you
Yes.
want to wait and take all those at the same time?
so Mayor, I'd like to propose that we put all three of those together, that we put three, E and 3D and number 5, actually, all together and just discuss them all together.
Is council okay with that?
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're restructuring the agenda though, can we also move the equestrian center up after that so that the folks who came to hear that discussion can hear it and leave? Not that they want to leave.
We want them to stay.
Are you saying you want the question center to come right now on the agenda, and then we do the WPI
After this, I'm presuming.
After this, just.
I would put it after 4, because that's a public hearing. So
I'll agree with.
So we could do it before 6. Okay, so we're now discussing consent item 3D, 3E, and then agenda item 5. Kurt?
Did the staff want to present anything or go through that way?
Or are you finishing your consent first? I think
Oh.
you have 3A, or I
Yeah,
still, I think, got pulled.
Yeah, 3I
So
did
I
get-
got pulled.
I'm sorry, 3I did get pulled.
So do you want to take the I separately, Kim?
Yeah, I'll take I. I just wanted to pull I because this is something that that I like to advocate for. This item is the ordinance amendment to section 19.5 maternity leave at the Highland City Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual. And this is something that City Council has worked with staff on. As many people may or may not know, we are only required to do FMLA, standard 12-week FMLA of unpaid maternity leave. And we worked with staff to say, you know what, let's be an example as Highland City and have a little bit more flexibility here, and also provide a modified FMLA leave. So the first 8 weeks are off to allow for recovery, and next 8 weeks the employee is working part-time with the remaining 20 hours being FMLA leave. I'm just pulling it because I want people to know that Highland City really cares about their staff, and this is an issue that needs to be not just addressed on the city level, but state level and federal level as well. And I just hope that other cities will take note of this discussion and look at their policies as well, and take a look at how it affects their staff and what kind of flexibility they can allow also within their cities. So that's the only reason I'm pulling it. So I'd like to make a motion if that's okay on this.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve consent item 3I.
I'll second that.
Motion by Kim, second by Kurt.
Give me 1 second, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Mayor, it's not cooperating. I suggest we just do a voice
Okay.
vote.
Then all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Okay, now we're on to 3D, E, and 5. Did you have
So-
some comments you wanted to make before staff goes?
So, yeah, the reason I pulled this is I think there's a lot of, all three of these kind of are dealing with the area that's over by Wendy's, where we have our Fizz, UPS, the swimsuit store, Myers Meat, and the new proposal for a new 6,100 square foot building. I think, for me, there's a lot of concerns up on the traffic movement, and I haven't seen anything that kind of helps with that. I think anyone that's visited that area can notice that we have had, which is great to see some businesses that's exceeding. We want to support them with success. I just want to see if we can have, my recommendation is to have a civil engineer that would do a traffic study, which would kind of be like a parking study, to look to see about the flow of the traffic and things of that nature, to see if there's some suggestions for this entire area. And that would include that area by Wendy's that is going to be to the south of that Wendy's parking area, the parking lot in front of Myers Meats, and even the Myers Meats area, and just looking across that whole area to see if we can kind of see what would be the flow as we add this building and we're adding an extra drive-through, to make sure that we're using the most efficiency to help these businesses succeed, Nothing against, I'm excited to have this new building come in. I want to support them to be able to have some more retail, but just want to make sure if there's a way to mitigate some of the concerns, the stacking of the cars in the drive-throughs. We're just hearing from a lot of the business owners there that there's been a lot of traffic issues, and so.
Okay, so your suggestion, because part of the project includes buying a small piece of land for Highland, that we continue this until we have a plan that they've researched and they've come back and said specifically, we've looked at all these issues. Here's some possible mitigation things, rather than just have it be squishy, because right now it's just squishy.
I'd like to have WPI, which is the property owner of the Fizz building, the property south of Wendy's, and also this new building, to come back with what they would has a recommendation from an engineer study to help us understand that we're not creating more problems as we add another drive-through there. And one of the reasons I pulled the purchase off is if by not approving that purchase, we're not approving the drive-through. I just want to make sure that we're not compounding the issue by selling the ground that allows the drive-through that's causing the problem.
Okay, so is there any value in going through the presentations for 5, or do we just say continue those 3 items until?
Unless WPI happens to have an engineer study that they provide this.
Daniel Schmidt, the representative for WPI, is present, and he also has had Hales Engineering do a couple studies regarding traffic flow and parking. Daniel, if you wanted to come up and discuss a little bit about it, I know Councilmember Kirk did give a little bit of background, but just to gain some more understanding, the vicinity map up there, the red outline is their proposed site plan, and it's a little difficult to see, but the yellow on the east and south sides is the requested purchase of Highland City land. The west side is what Councilmember Kirk was mentioning. That would allow the drive-through to come in to match the proposed site plan, and then the land to the south is just to line it up with the Myers Walk to the east. But Daniel, you can go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Daniel Schmidt with WPI. We're the landowners there. And we do recognize that there are and have been some traffic and congestion problems created by the pandemic. Our belief is that as a long-term issue, that is relatively short, being that it's...
So Dan, I do know that those issues were there before the pandemic.
Okay.
Right, so it wasn't created by the pandemic. That traffic flow was a concern because Fizz was very successful. Yeah. And it did create problems for UPS and the other store that's in that.
Well, let's address, we did do a traffic study. Impact study of the site. We do have our traffic engineer here that can address those issues specifically. I know Kurt and I had a conversation earlier. I did provide a site plan, or a couple of site plans that help explain a couple of things in terms of the larger picture and vision that Kelly's going to help find for us. But effectively, what we're seeing is that the traffic management, well, as a concerned site, it seems to be discussed that it's a site issue. We don't believe that it is a site issue in terms of design. In terms of number of parking stalls, we've exceeded by almost double what the city requirements are, and that's just because as developers and property owners, we know what the market requires. And that goes the same for drive-throughs. I don't believe, unless I've missed it, that Highland City has a stacking code. Maybe I've missed that, or a specific stacking ordinance for drive-throughs. Some cities do, but not a lot do. In the marketplace, in terms of stacking and for drive-throughs, 7 would be considered adequate, but 7 to 10 kind of range is usually what the market's looking for. On the Fizz building specifically, we have 8, without stacking into the drive aisles specifically, right? We have 8. On the new building, we have 11. And so, again, if you take Fizz out of the equation just for a moment, and we look at the site and the site design, we feel that it's appropriately set for the marketplace commercial development functionality of tenants and consumers and those kinds of things. We also have on the site one of the other issues that kind of perhaps compounds or adds to the congestion last year with the pandemic was or is that the Myers site is parking is off to the east of its store as opposed to in front of the store. That was by design or by the will of the owner of the property, Meyer and his group. And in the meantime, we do have cross-parking and cross-access, although all sites are supposed to, hold their own amount of parking. And so while the sites or the building to the west hadn't been built or proposed specifically, we've allowed those consumers of Myers to sort of park in the front with traffic management issues. The drive aisle in front of Myers is where primarily all the cars come in and out without a secondary exit off to the west at some location. We've studied extensively the ingress-egress point and tried to previously get approved with the city's help through UDOT ingress-egress point at the city's exit just to the top left of the actual proposed building, as well as we've talked with Rocky Mountain Power, reducing their drive aisle accesses and looked at the easement or potential for easement to take the drive aisle in front of Myers all the way west to 5600 West, which would be another option in terms of alleviating or gaining access there. Rocky Mountain Power has sort of declined to do both, at least today. We'll say on the development side, never say never, as well as UDOT. Our traffic engineer, as traffic increases on SR 92, it sort of changes the warrant status quarter by quarter, if you will, and those things are being continually monitored so the appropriate time we can make the application to have the right kind of support for that access. That access, whether it's to the directly to the north left or northwest, in that sense, thank you, of the building or directly across to 5600 West would ultimately solve any of these issues. And so we're viewing these as relatively short term, but it's how we best manage that plan in the meantime. As I said, or as even Councilman Osler had pointed out, the additional surplus land does accommodate the drive-through, and so per chance, I know the city's considering that, but per chance, if it wasn't an option, it would just mean that the building wouldn't have a drive-through. In our opinion, that doesn't necessarily solve but add to traffic issues in that people use the drive-through relatively quick. People would need to park and patron the store sort of in person. That actually creates more congestion in terms of parking for staying time. We're all happy for Fizz's success. We did work with them and all the surrounding tenants and owners like the Myers lot in terms of trying to find the optimal solution for stacking in the meantime. And that, of course, similar to what our traffic engineer can show, is diverting traffic around where cars need to gain access. So the traffic management plan and study through our engineers that we've come up with effectively does that. It gets people off the drive aisle, have ingress there, but allows them to exit in multiple places. And we believe that that optimizes the site in the meantime while we make application for the other accesses.
Questions?
No, I assume we're going to see some traffic studies or things, is that right?
Yes, and I'd like to point out too, I guess, thank you, Councilman, just specifically just south of the Wendy's lot, we do own that land. It is currently, as you're aware, it does have sort of a vacant pad there, or just sort of dirt. The rest is asphalted. What you see on the screen right now is the agreement with Wendy's that we were able to secure a couple of years ago when we were looking at the site a little bit more specifically. And this allows for the, what we'll call those parking islands in a north-south orientation as opposed to east-west that they currently are. As much as Fizz's success has created a little bit of a stacking problem, we all know that Wendy's here or there has created an equal stacking problem with only ingress-egress out of their small access point. This enables consumers to be able to access Wendy's through the drive aisles and then exit through the drive aisles too, as opposed to stack up in the main ingress-egress points. and that's been secured and will be put in place as soon as we develop that property. In the meantime, our proposal is, and if you could switch to the traffic management plan. Sorry, that didn't come in the right orientation for you. Thank you. You'll see again, if we're just looking specifically, and this is the study and the production of the engineers that's here, is just south of Wendy's. There are some striping. There was some striping a number of years ago that just sort of directs traffic a little bit more and creates additional sort of parking. We've also proposed here and there that employees of the different tenants there can have their employees park out in that field, which is frees up anything in front of the store specifically. But I guess to this plan specifically, I could let our traffic engineer address the specifics and what they saw and how this plan works and help solve the problem. This is Ryan Hales with Hales Engineering.
Mayor and Council, thank you for letting us come and be here this evening. And thanks for letting me take off my mask for a minute.
You're welcome to.
I promise I will put it back on. In the essence of time, I just want to draw your attention. Obviously, Fizz has been very successful, and we're all grateful for that. But it does come with its consequences as well. And there's a lot of stacking that occurs in the parking area. And so what we're trying to do is look at the site in general and try and identify how we can manage that traffic best with what we have. Obviously, within the site, there are a couple things that we would like to do. One of those is try and restrict the access that runs east-west in front of the site. Where Fizz comes across, the queuing backs up on occasion, and people have been trying to enter the site at that location. So we want to try and minimize the entry point and not have an entry there, but only have an exit, so that if somebody gets in line and they determine that they don't want to wait, they can exit out through that site very quickly. But at the same time, restrict the entrance flow through that site. So we've tried to narrow that opening so that we have one directional traffic flow. You'll notice that there's some arrows there on the ground. We've shown two directional arrows.
So is that planned, or have you already done, has that already been done?
No, we've just talked about it.
Okay.
So looking at that would be one thing that could be implemented. I think there's some temporary cones out there.
So what you're talking about is choking that entrance, so it's just a one-way exit in a sense, right?
Correct. That is correct. In that way, we can keep the queue around on the inside. One other thing that we've talked about is extending that queue a little bit further to the west so that it goes through the parking lot that would be north of Myers. Myers parking lot, again, is to the east. This would go through that shared use parking area in this temporary condition and bring people around. I apologize, I don't have a laser pointer, but I think I have one. I apologize, this is up behind you. I don't know if you'll see it.
We have a screen right in front of you, so.
Fantastic. So what we're talking about is where the egress lane would come through this way. Our intent would be that the ingress would come through and turn and come in here under peak flow conditions if need be. It could be that the flow could come in through here, through this drive aisle, and then back around. Again, it's a little bit different than we may have anticipated. Again, Fizz has been very, very successful, and that's great. We're trying to figure out how to solve that issue, but that would be one item. The other thing that we would do is we would have one directional arrows potentially. I don't know that anybody's talked to Myers yet, but one directional arrows pointing southward through the parking lot. So cars could enter the Myers site and then exit down to the south so they could avoid any congestion up here on the north end. Just trying to provide an alternative for them. I think many people don't know and realize, I myself have shopped at Myers on multiple occasions, and I have always parked in the parking lot just to the north of Myers. And that will probably still continue and should. They are shared use parking lots, so we want to make sure that that shared use parking is still available to everybody. And yet try and work within the site parameters that we've been given to try and move that traffic through the site. So we're doing the best we can, and certainly open to any suggestions you might have, but we're trying to make this work as a whole. Again, we don't see it as a parking issue. It's really an access issue of how people get into that drive-through. With that, Mayor, Council, I would entertain any questions you might have.
I've got a question. So, I shop at Myers. I don't spend a lot of money at Fizz because I'm a physician. I don't think soda's good for you. Sorry. But I don't understand from all the arrows and things that you've done here how if you direct the traffic down the road or the access right in front of Myers, how that's not going to impair my ability to get into Myers and buy fresh fruit and vegetables. Because it looks to me like you're cramming up that. And I really think I would like to see, you know, some more explanation and take some time, like Councilman Osler suggested, that we can really understand the traffic flow, because I welcome this commercial development. I was on the council before when we actually surplused the old Highland City Water building that was sitting on this site. And so I like commercial, I like sales tax, I like the services, but at the same time, I don't want us to impair the ability of a pre-existing business to function and have sufficient parking and things by fouling it all up. I mean, we went through a big discussion earlier this year about whether we're going to put a road through the parking lot at Ace Hardware. And I had the same concerns at that time, because those are good functional businesses, and I don't want to impair the ability to get in and out of those. So I would like to see more than just a few little arrows on the map. I'd like to see kind of some suggestions and how you've designed this. And that's kind of my personal opinion, because I don't want to impair the other businesses, and I think UPS has a problem. Myers is having a problem with this. You know, I don't know about the swimwear place, but I know it's lined up all the time into Fizz, and I'm glad they're successful. But at the same time, I don't want to impair the other businesses if we can avoid it.
Yeah, no, totally understand. Frozen hot chocolate, by the way.
That's not good for you either.
I really like their fruit water drinks, so.
Yeah, now that's better, okay.
So just tell me, so you presented, I think, was it one or two options? You know, one is choking down the entrance coming into that building where the UPS Fizz and the swim store's at. But then you're moving the traffic out to go out in front. And like you said on the queuing, some of it's just kind of how that, were you saying you're trying to take the parking in front of that building to queue them to kind of go in?
So our intent would be to bring that queue around the corner and let it wrap around when it's a shorter queue. When the queue elongates, we'd have an employee go out or something.
So how do the cars back out of UPS or the swimwear if there's cars queued in?
I understand. We've got an issue that we're trying to solve. And right now, we're putting the best efforts we can to try and solve it within the parameters that we have. We can't move the UPS store from where it is, but we're trying to keep that queue rolling, keep it moving, and elongate the queue so it's not blocking up the entry and jamming everything up. And that's item number one. Item number two is we'll have to come back in and look at this and see how we can handle that. Again, it's one at a time.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to speak for Ryan specifically, but one of the prior discussion points, is it just pressing this button? Yeah. Is that obviously anything stacking here is what creates the problem for any of patrons going in and out of UPS. And UPS we've discussed with multiple times, and part of his contribution to the solution is to get his trucks to pick up and deliver vehicles out of those drive aisles as well. And so everyone's trying to contribute and do this part. But the way that, or the current working model, if you will, with Fizz that they're working with is to have the cars stacked through here. This provides, by closing that off, provides one more, so there's 9. Not material, but everything contributes. One of the things that's contributing to the issue today is that the Fizz lobby isn't open. I'm sure that you're aware of that, unless you never patron the store anyway. They'll be opening the store here in June 1, I believe is what they told us. So that'll help, as well as, of course, SWIG down by Lone Peak High School has also helped in terms of that's taken a percentage of their sales away and therefore decreased the impact there. But they currently have employees that stand out here and out here that as soon as traffic starts to back up, they outside this queue, they come and manage it and have them stack out this direction.
In terms of this direction in the past, they have come down this outside. Again, that's sort of peak pandemic times. If in the future they'll be coming down this middle aisle. Now, all patrons, in terms of retail and consumption there, you generally park closest to your store, right? So parking out in front here for Myers patrons, again, in the meantime, that's not necessarily a problem. In the future here, there's going to be sort of a re-education of public, trying to encourage them to be parking in this field. If Myers patrons are parking in this field, let's just say hypothetically exclusively, then there is never an issue in terms of the impact from Fizz. Now, that's not a reality in terms of 100%. Patrons still will park in the most convenient location. But as such, parking closest to the store, if they're backing in this location in terms of the upper field, it's out of the way of any other kind of proximity to stores in terms of this location and or the new store. We don't believe that the new drive-through users will create the same kind of stacking problems. We haven't seen that across our 2 million square foot portfolio. We do have a handful of users in the marketplace today that we are experiencing stacking issues with, and the soda places are one of them. But in terms of moving that traffic away from all the stores, it's freeing up particularly this lane. So patrons sort of come in this lane, but exit out another lane. Patrons would come in this lane and exit out another one. I have met with Marsh Meyer of Myers, and I don't mean to represent him, in discussion with this kind of a plan or thought process. It's not necessarily, I should say, the comment was, and Marsh is here and he can speak for himself, he does have trucks that come out here. My recommendation again is we all work together. I don't know his operating hours exactly, but if it's from like 7 to 10 at night, that's about 15 operating hours. If he has 3 trucks per day at an hour each in terms of deliveries and restocking stores, then that would take out 3 hours worth of exiting options. But that still avails, 12 hours worth of exiting in terms of this kind of vicinity. Again, so it's moving cars away in terms of they're ingressing here, but they're moving away from the stores, and then they're parking closer. So in terms of the overall study, it's moving the traffic away from the problem points, which is what this plan does, as well as the stacking in terms of the furthest possible distance. That's the essence of the plan in the study.
So when would you start implementing some of those components?
As soon as we start construction on this, we'll do everything at the same time.
And I just have another question unrelated.
Yeah.
Is there a plan for that dirt pad over southeast of Wendy's?
Yes, there is, and I recognize there's sort of a lot here, but if we could just go back to the prior plans, I think it's entitled owner's parcels or something. Yes, that plan there, and that's sort of a future plan that's approximately 3,600 square feet. It's smaller than any of the buildings there. And this is sort of appropriate traffic. You can't quite...
So you would put a building there in that dirt pad?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that's some point in the future. We don't have specific plans or interest today from anyone, nor are we marketing it. But again, this plan here in terms of the parking orientation, building, et cetera, are approved with Wendy's and Wendy's landowner. It's owned by a separate owner than the Wendy's lease. And both are sort of approved of this plan in terms of traffic management and easing any kind of concerns over here. So again, coming back to this, this is the congestion point along with ingress egress here. But if we're moving everything away from that in terms of getting the parking oriented over here for these buildings, ingress egress points over here for these buildings, allowing people to enter through here, but moving all the stacking and moving all the parking or exiting away from the congestion points is the maximum that you can really hope to achieve. And again, if we just reiterate that that's all being done while we continue to work on this access here or access out here, which we do believe, and your city engineer can sort of cast his probabilities on success of that. Our belief is that that will come in 100% at some point in time. We just don't have it today.
Can I ask a question, Mayor?
Go ahead. Sure.
Maybe, Kurt, your question should go first. I was just wondering if, I think that you mentioned that somebody from Myers is here.
Mm-hmm.
Just if we could at some point, I would like to hear what the actual businesses say, because I agree with Councilmember Smith that we have an obligation to our businesses that are already established. So I'd like to hear from them at some point.
Sure. That's fine. My question was more for Ryan Hells, is let's assume this is a clean slate. Now, you can't move the buildings, but you have a clean slate. What would you do? That's kind of what I'm going, if this was all clean, how would you design this, knowing the issues that the current design has? What would you do with a total clean slate to help us with our issue?
You know, there's a couple things I would look at first and foremost is moving that traffic, making sure that the ingress coming through is a little cleaner, coming over to this point where we can tie in to Town Center Drive. I would also think an east-west connection, either coming all the way out here to 5600 West, or a connection going to the north would be helpful to have one more ingress-egress point. You know, the hard part is with something like Fizz that has been so successful. We've seen Fizz, we've seen, I can't name them all, Swig.
Sodalicious.
Sodalicious, thank you. There are many different ones that people are now patronizing, and the one in Lehigh, and it's a, what is it? I think it's a Swig. It sits between Main Street and State Street. That queue can wrap around the building entirely and actually back out onto State Street on Lehigh on the back side, so the north side of it. So the problem that you're experiencing is not what they're experiencing there. We're lucky in that sense that, you know, we're trying to work on it. We can contain it within the parking lot, and we're trying to not get it to back out onto other roadways, but we're still trying to solve it internally, which is still an issue. And that's why we're here tonight, is to talk about that and talk about some things that we can do to try and fix that. I think they're just so wildly successful that nobody was aware of how they were going to be patronized.
So let's come back to the question here, Ryan.
Yeah.
We don't have a second exit at this current time, and we don't know if we can get it from UDOT. So I'm going to give you your parameters. You have no second exit. You have no road going over to 5600 West. You have the current parking lot as is, but there's no islands in the middle of it. It's all fresh, and you've got to go put the parking in. What would you do?
Again, you've got an issue here where you've got stacking, where people come up to this area and they want to make a left turn, right? And they back up so far. So you want to try and move that access as far away from the intersection with SR 92 as you can. In this case, right? No, I'm getting there. But certainly with that access point, this is moved to a point where it's back as far as you can get it between the development to the south and the one to the north. That's a great location. It matches with the other one across the street. So this is your access point, right? So the next one coming in, we've got an access point coming in here. So we need to connect the two of those. Those two are connected coming through the site, through here. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to strengthen what that
Is that curvature with the plan there, is that a little concern where you're going to have them come down and curve it because it's not a real natural flow through?
It's not bad to have that curvature. If we can go to the other drawing, apologize for switching back and forth between them. What we were trying to do with this drawing is, again, to try and provide positive guidance to those people that are coming through. So with some striping, try and delineate where they would go. At some point in the future, we may get away from the striping and go to a more of a hard curb to try and bring people around, but it's to try and solidify where that corner goes. And then it's about accessing the rest of the site. This aisle is good because it separates a couple of the different sites. You've got, you know, a future building, you've got this one, and you've got the Myers over here. It helps separate and give traffic the opportunity to flow through the site, which you want from any site. Ideally, we wouldn't probably have that go past the front of the store, but it does. So we're working on that now. And again, this is a fairly low volume condition. It's not like Walmart. In Walmart, they've got a road that goes in front of those stores all the way along. And it's hard for pedestrians because you've got to cross that traffic stream. Walmart themselves would probably do it very differently if they didn't find that it worked. So it does work in their condition, but they wouldn't prefer to have everybody crossing there, I'm sure. It becomes more of a safety issue. In this case, we're low volume. I think this is in the right spot as well. I think this corner, strengthening that and giving some definition and delineation is good. I think the biggest issue is not necessarily parking. I think the parking would be good on a shared use parking basis, but I think it's, you know, again, the traffic management in a temporary condition where we've got queues that are backing up, and it's trying to solve that temporary condition to try and keep the cars from backing up here and trying to push them further into the site and around where they can stack up over on this site.
But it says you stack those cars there, people have to come out of the drive-through, and you could have cars backing them up, and so you've now kind of, I can't turn because I got a car waiting here to get in the queue to get in. I mean, you're kind of putting each other against them.
It's kind of the lesser of two evils, right? We're trying to clear out this area too, and so we're trying to stop them so that we can elongate the queue here, and then we're also trying to provide some queuing in another area that's not here, and so we're working within the site parameters that we have to try and make it work again as best we can. And I apologize for reiterating that, but we're working within a site that we had a very successful use, and now we're just trying to figure out how to make it work.
And I just want to make sure, I think what the other council members have mentioned, we don't want to affect the current businesses. We want more business to come in, but what are we giving up by having that come in, or by having the issue? What can we do to help those? We want everyone to be successful. We want them to keep growing. We want every store there to keep having success.
Absolutely. And we're with you 100%, and we'll work with you as we go through this. We're trying to identify a solution that'll work as well. So if there's any silver bullets out there, we're willing to look at those.
I just didn't, that's why I wanted to have it, a traffic engineer go, what's your silver bullet? What do you have that could kind of help solve the issue?
Well, and I think we're working very hard to solve the issue of, backing up through here. And I think the plan as proposed does that very well. The ideal, when people come around the corner, if they want to turn, there's still space for them to come down between the cars. The idea is that nobody blocks that off, and that we have cars stacking here, and then we have cars stacking back this direction, whatever that takes.
So on Friday night, that's what was happening. They were down that little center aisle all at 2 o'clock, all the way up, turned down. And I agree with Fizz is doing really well by trying to have a person there in the corner to try to take the order so they're not going in that parking. I mean, I think as a tenant, they've been trying to be sensitive to the other tenants. And it's just hard because the type of business, and the way it's all flowing.
Yeah.
I think coming what Councilmember Bill's mentioned, maybe about hearing about, from Mr. Myers about how he sees this type of flow, and maybe what you're proposing and what his feelings are in that.
Yeah, no, and I'd be interested to hear his take on it too. We want to be successful here. We want them to be successful. We want this to work for everybody. And we want people to come in, drop their wallet, and leave, right? Bring their money here.
I just want them to take the money out of the wallet. They don't need to drop the wallet.
Is Mr. Myers?
Mayor, are we okay if we have...
My question to you, Brittany, did you want to hear from Marsh?
Yes.
I would like to, yes.
I'm Marsh Meyer, the owner of Myers Meats. Let me first say, I am not opposed to more retail. I think the city needs it. I want it. I'd like that lot cleaned up. But what I am opposed to is putting more cars into a dead end. And a couple of the problems. When you start sending people up those 2 lanes for the drive-ups, that wipes out that parking spots because they back up. People cannot back out. They can't get in and they can't get out. The other situation is the proposed, and Daniel and I met yesterday, is that we're forcing our customers to go in there, and then we're telling them they need to go out our driveway, which is our loading dock. Trucks are backing in there all the time. I can't tell you. There's trucks in there from 6 and 7 in the morning to sometimes 5 at night. Sometimes there's 3 and 4 trucks. The other thing that I think is kind of dangerous is the dumpsters, both dumpsters. The dumpster that WPI put in is on my property over there on that driveway, and my dumpster is. At night, it's very dark over there. And when you start pushing a lot of traffic out there, there's some kids that are going to run over. Because it's dark, you can't see. That road turns, and that's not a good solution, to force our customers out that way. The other thing, in the front of our building, that's where our handicap parking is, and when you start stacking cars in front there, people can't get out there, and that was the big problem this summer, is that our customers, I can't get in or out. Some say that they had to wait 10 to 15 minutes to back out. People want their fix, and they're not going to let anybody in. So it's just a bad situation. I met with some of the members of the city yesterday, and we looked at it, and I don't have a good solution. But putting more cars in another business in there until access can be made either on SR 92 or on that other street, it's just not good for me, my customers. I know Todd, who owns UPS, he's really frustrated. He comes over every day and gets a drink, and we talked. I thought he was going to be here, but he's really frustrated. His customers are now parking in our east parking lot and walking across because they can't get out. So that's, I guess, all I have to say, unless there's any other questions.
Any other questions for Marsh?
I have, not for Mike, I just have a general question. Sure. Why is UDOT so opposed to putting another access in here? Maybe Todd can tell us.
So what I've been told is, if you look, the Rocky Mountain Power, Aaron, is there any way you could show them right there? So Rocky Mountain Power has two accesses right there. This is our access for our well house right here. They have actually said that we cannot combine these and change the current configuration of that access, and so that's why they're not doing that. But we actually kind of approached, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, you talked to Rocky Mountain Power as well, to try to combine these and create a better access there, but UDOT did not want so many accesses right next to where they eventually will have a signal. So 5600 West right now is planned to have a signal for UDOT. It's on the plan. It's just a matter of funding and just in line of projects they're doing. And that's the main reason they did not want another access so close to that intersection.
So there was some discussion here of extending the road in front of Myers through the Utah Power and Light property to 5600.
Correct.
What's been the discussion on that? Because that seems like a way to kind of solve some of this as well.
It's just a matter of approaching Rocky Mountain Power and splitting up their property. I think that's the biggest concern, is they own, all of this property. I just think that putting a road through there splits it up, and it's just a matter of making it less valuable for them.
It would seem like it would provide more access for them, but I don't know.
I would love to see it happen.
So Todd, with your expertise, is there a benefit for us to continue this and to have Hill Engineering come back with some designs showing with the choking down, or do you feel like, hey, this is really what we're going to still end up with? There's not, is it better to continue and have some designs come back where we can visually see it a little bit better, have them look at it a little bit more, or do you feel like there's been enough studying and this is really the configuration that's going to have to end up working?
Well, tonight is the first time I've seen this, and I know Ryan hasn't been working on it too much. It's just recently that they've involved him. I definitely think that putting your head together and maybe, because they are building a new building, adding another drive-through is concerning. Where we already have the two problems with Wendy's and Fizz. I don't see how you ultimately fix the problem with Fizz. You're always going to have the backing through here that is going to virtually make these parking stalls unusable for UPS. So I just don't, unless you completely configure the site,
There's just no way to eliminate that problem.
So I guess that's a question. If we did have the whole site reconfigured in front and off the side, I guess they could remove that parking and just put like a little dedicated area to go into the drive-through there, going across. I'm just trying to think, is there some benefit in saying, hey, let's continue this, have Hell's Engineering come back with what some proposals are, maybe a little bit better drawings about what the choking down might look like with the arrows, so we can kind of have give them some time to look at the site a little bit more, because like you said, I think this is, or that's what I'm saying, is that's kind of where I'm leaning, is saying, hey, let's continue this till April, and let's give Ryan Hells some time to come back with some concept drawings to help us maybe a bit better visually see what they're really trying to do.
Yeah. I would really like to see us master plan the whole thing for everything that will go in there. I mean, that's what they've started to do, but I would love to see that we can try to address some of these concerns. So if and when WPI comes in to bring this piece in, that we already kind of have a master plan of how this is going to work. I would love to see that.
Okay. I support it as well.
Do we have somebody from Fizz here that would like to tell us about their drive-through? Seems like, yeah, that's where the discussion revolves. While we're thinking about that, is there any way we can take out those big center medians to make that more useful somehow? I don't know. Yeah.
My name's Joe Pavia. I'm a resident of Highland and also a business owner. Our first 2 years, I hadn't received a single complaint of our drive-through stacking. That doesn't mean we didn't have problems, but they didn't escalate to the point where I was notified as a business owner that we had blockage through those parking spots. It wasn't until the pandemic hit, we had to close our lobby, and people were not able to get soft drinks at Maverick or at Hart's because they were not allowing self-service. So we've obviously enjoyed and been stressed over the amount of business that has come our way, especially during the pandemic. And once we were notified and identified the issues, we have, as has been mentioned, someone who takes payments here to keep cars from making a U-turn and cutting off the other customers who have been waiting in line. As you can imagine, we get a lot of irate customers when we have this part open, because people come into here and they say, hey, there's the last car in line. But we have another employee here who keeps this piece open. Now, are there times where 4 or 5 cars quickly come in and start to line up? Sure. But it may be blocked for 2, 3, 4 minutes at a time until our employees can get out, stop the traffic from entering until they can move and proceed through here. I do feel like a lot of the problems we saw were because of the pandemic. We have seen our business decrease, our sales decrease when SWIG opened up, probably 10 or 15% of our sales, and our lobby's been closed, and so we've also saw an increase in drive-through traffic. I would love it to have the business we did last summer, this summer, and I feel like we're in a better situation. We have added Wi-Fi extenders so that we can take payments and orders outside. The rare time during the summer when we saw traffic come down in front of Myers here, we would send out 2 employees to take orders to get that moving as quickly as we can. We obviously haven't seen that since late fall. Our business is seasonal. As a business owner, I do welcome, and as a resident of Highland, additional businesses here. But I too would want to make sure that the shopping center can handle that. I feel like if we educate our customers on the flow of traffic, where to park, we have clear signage, painted lines, I think it will alleviate a lot of the issues that we've seen last summer. And especially as business decreases as we get past the pandemic. But again, I feel like if we can continue to get this flow of traffic here, Myers parking in here, our drive-through line continuing through here, and educate our customers that there is another exit. I can't tell you how many times I see people coming out of Wendy's and try to make this U-turn right here. If they just knew that they could come down through here and exit and use the town center boulevard, that would alleviate a lot of the congestion that we see as business owners. But it's just educating the residents, it's educating the consumers. But again, before I think we move into something like this, I think as long as we have a plan that is beneficial for all the businesses in that area, I think it's doable. But that's up to you guys to make that decision. Any questions for me?
No, I just want to tell you, I mean, isn't it great you have a successful business? I mean, I go, are we really kind of trying to pound Fizz because you're having a successful business? And I hope you don't feel that. I recognize you're trying to mitigate where you can. It just, you know, it's hard when the business starts to grow. I mean, I think, you know, Myers had growth last year. You're growing. I mean, and so we're having it going, okay, help us. That's all we're asking is WPI as you're coming in, help us with some growth. We're hoping that really Fizz just keeps going. I mean, that's our anticipations, that you're going to, you know, that, hey, summer comes in, everyone's still thirsty. They were getting there during the pandemic, and they're going to still keep coming. We're hoping that, Myers Meats keeps having all their business come. You know, that's our hope, and we want to plan to try to help you guys be successful.
Thank you.
I just want to say, as a frequent soda drinker that is continuously trying to cut down, I'm very familiar with the soda places in all of Utah County, and Fizz has done a great job of trying to mitigate that traffic. You go to the Swig in Lehigh on State Street, I can't even touch it anymore because it's stacked up on State Street. I also go to UPS quite a bit as a frequent Amazon user, and you know, it's very obvious that I can get in, I can park. Those two employees are making sure that they're mitigating that traffic as well. You know, it's a problem, but with what we have, they're doing a great job of mitigating that problem. I do think, though, that continuing this item and putting it off just for another 2 weeks, just to make sure we can put our heads together, get a clearer picture of exactly how we can mitigate all traffic patterns before going on with the new development is a great idea. And I think that's best for not just the city, but for the developers as well, that it'll help their storefronts as well. So I think as a council, we just continue it for 2 weeks and give ourselves a little bit more time to put our heads together.
I agree. So do we need, what do we need? A motion
to continue.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor, is there other things you need to have discussed on this item, or?
I don't think so.
So I move that we continue items number 3D, 3E, and number 5.
I'll second it.
Continue till April 20th, or what's?
To our next council meeting, which will be April 20th.
I'll take a drink for that.
Okay, is there motion by Kurt?
I second it.
By Scott, to continue this till April 20th and ask you to just do some more homework. Are we ready to vote? Or do we need to do a voice vote on that as well?
You should be able to vote. Just give me a second to get to the right slide. Okay. So even though it says approve, this is the motion to continue that was made.
Okay. Okay. That passes unanimously. Okay, item 4, public hearing, plat amendment, Caldwell Woods Estates, lot 6 and 7.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Aaron, just getting it to the slide real quick. This is a plat amendment for the Cobblewood Estates subdivision. This is by applicant Craig Hassel. He's just representing, what are the names? John and Kylie Woodley, who are the property owners of lots 6 and 7. Thank you. There's a vicinity map. It's just on the northeastern end of Highland City. The Cobblewood Estates subdivision was approved back in 2012. Like I said, it's to combine lots 6 and 7. We did receive one citizen comment over call just regarding the use of the lot. I guess the property owner does own a helicopter, and so they were concerned about the other lot being used as a helicopter pad, but we do know that the future plan was to build a pool on that lot, which is why we're requiring them to combine the lots. That is the proposed plat. And we, as staff, just recommend that the City Council hold a public hearing and approve the final plat subject to the following stipulations, which are our standard stipulations for a plat amendment.
Okay, council, if you'll indulge me, I will open the public hearing up. Anybody want to speak to this issue? Seeing none, is there anybody online?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, it looks like we have a volunteer.
Sorry, just to correct, I'm the applicant.
Okay, you're the applicant, all right.
The owners are actually Ryan and Jenny Woodley. It's to build an accessory building, and if they have a helicopter, that's news to me.
They have a what?
If they have a helicopter, that's news to me. So, it's just to build an accessory building, and that has to be combined to be an accessory building. So
Correct.
Not a pool.
So not a pool, just an accessory building. Okay.
Okay, my bad.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that clarification, any comments? All right, we close the public hearing. Council?
I'd like to make a motion if that's
So
okay.
one thing before you do, Kim, can we do have a policy in place, I believe, or a resolution about helicopters inside residential neighborhoods, is that correct?
We do have one, but it is regarding landing helicopters on public property or on roads, not regarding private land. So.
And there was a notice that was sent out. Does it appear the neighbors know that this might be the plan for that property?
Yes, that's why they contacted me, is because they got the public notice.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move that the City Council accept the findings and approve Cobblewood Estates Lots 6 and 7 amended plat subject to the 2 stipulations recommended by staff.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott. Okay. What we're voting? Okay. And votes are all in. That passes unanimously. Okay, and I believe we agreed to move item 8 up to now. So this is costs associated with the Equestrian Center Park.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A pleasure to be with you. Here are a few slides to share with you some information regarding a proposal that was made. So Community Development Partners is interested in developing the equestrian park and adding some additional recreation venues, including soccer fields. The county owns the park and is looking for support from the area cities before moving forward with the project. Here, approximately a little over a month ago, the mayor and council member Bills and council member Wardella met with representatives of community development partners to discuss that, and other conversations have occurred since. Community development partners also provided additional details on the proposed project, and we have in turn prepared some high-level estimates of what the city could expect as far as costs. This is an image that Community Development Partners provided here, high-level description of what they intend or envision. And with regard to costs, here we are estimating that the one-time costs here to get up and going, there would need to be some additional water connections made.
So the 75K is the cost to run the pressurized irrigation line into the park?
That's
where
correct.
it doesn't currently exist, okay.
Also need to assign some water shares to that, so there's a cost associated with that. One of the factors that we think is important to consider, we don't have costs for this as one, improving or expanding asphalt. And that, of course, would involve ongoing costs as well to maintain that. But based on the information we've received, we don't have enough to determine at this point what those costs would be. On an ongoing basis, water, based on earlier presentations, maybe water doesn't cost enough these days, but the annual cost would be $5,000. Equestrian park maintenance, their conversations I believe the mayor's had has indicated that there would be a nonprofit group who would be interested potentially, and we estimate that cost would be about $25,000.
So above and beyond what they could provide.
Right.
And I put a fudge factor in. It's just how.
Then also maintenance of the fields, which there is a proposal, I understand, to have the groups that would be using that to participate. If for some reason that didn't work out, we estimate that the city's cost with use of the city resources would be about $36,000. So again, not including cost of bringing the asphalt up to reasonable state and maintaining that, we would anticipate $201,000 up front, and then an ongoing annual cost of $66,000. So with that, I believe that any discussion that you'd like to have is appropriate.
Thank you. Thanks for doing the homework on that. I appreciate it. So, Council, I wanted you to understand if we were to go ahead and or if the county were to sell it and we were to support it, that's what our costs would be. You know, one of the big components that we hadn't factored in before was purchasing water rights, because when I talked to the county, there were no water rights associated with the property, and that's a pretty big expense. The ongoing costs of maintaining the asphalt is kind of unknown. We do know that fixing roads is can be expensive. I'm not sure what the condition of the road is, but Todd seemed to think that there were things that needed to be improved. We just have no idea what that would be. Now, if the park were to be unimproved, so if it were to be unimproved and then the three cities got together to help manage it, you could take out the water costs because we wouldn't have to run a PI line, we wouldn't have to buy water shares. If we lived it pretty much as is, you could take out some of those, the first two one-time costs. The equestrian center would still be there. And then the asphalt, we just have to work out with the county how that would work. So that's a question mark still. I mean,
So Mayor, currently at this time, is there a pressurized irrigation connection from one of the cities? Is it from Lehigh? Since they
no, there's no pressurized irrigation.
But how are they watering that grass?
That's with our culinary.
They're doing culinary?
Yeah, we provide culinary water to the equestrian center.
So that's Highland culinary water watering the grass by the pavilions?
Yes, which they're paying for. And it's, they aren't soccer field sized pieces of grass, but they're nice sized, but they're.
So if we kept it as is, and there's just assuming,
It's actually, it's kind of weird talking about this because it's not our land.
Correct, that's what I'm saying. So if we went with the 3 cities as a proposal, are you stating other than the asphalt, it could be $66,000 that the 3 cities would be looking at that need to be shared in some fashion? Is that?
No, you would take out the turf maintenance. So you take out the 30, it would be 30,000. Well, actually it'd be 25-ish. But I think it's more than that because you'd have some personnel costs of some staff going in to help manage the property, to fix things on occasion. You've got the pavilions, there's maintenance involved in those. There's caring for the grass if that was inherited, fertilizing the grass, so there would be other costs. But
Is this after, like if you look at the equestrian park maintenance, is that after the collection of, because I'm sure there's some fees that are paid by those individuals?
Yes, so this would be if the equestrian center users formed a nonprofit and agreed to help work on it. That is kind of the difference between what their fees would be and the cost to maintain the equestrian center indoor and outdoor arena. And that's an estimate, right? It could be wrong. But I just wanted everyone to have an idea that this is not free, right? And there's some costs associated with it. And we do have another park that we're going to be talking about that we don't necessarily have money for. We all got a lot of emails today about the equestrian center. I know, I've talked to Brad Frost, and their initial idea of what they would do with that park included a frisbee golf, a dog park, pickleball, and on-site community center. That vision has morphed into just leave it like it is, kind of with some minimal improvements. So that's what I know. I know we had an interest in the rec center, but we've heard from residents now who were supportive before that are not, right, Kim?
Yeah, I think they're supportive of, I guess as Mark Allen said, a rec center, but in a different location that is not open space that they're hoping to preserve.
So the thing is that absent us going with the rec center people and saying, okay, we would support, we're willing to foot those costs, and we're willing to make the zoning changes needed to accommodate the construction. Absent that, the county is not going to move on that cell. And I talked to Bill Lee, I've talked to Tom Sykovich. I had talked to Tanner, but he's no longer, he may have an opinion, but it doesn't matter anymore.
Hey, Nathan and Kelly, were those the latest images that they sent over?
Those aren't the latest images. That Tony's plan, if we go back to that now, has if you look at the bottom, you've got 2 pavilions on the north side of the road. Keeping one of those, making that other field a kiddie soccer field, expanding his building a little bit to accommodate basketball, and then putting the 2 soccer fields to the right of the equestrian center.
So his latest plan still did include a rec center, or no?
Yes, it did. So where the green is on the bottom, that's a rec center. That's not that's a indoor soccer field rec center. But there are, and as I've looked into this, and understood, I have no idea how horses work, right? I got on one once, and it was a scary thing, and not to be repeated. But, I talked with the horse people, they said Frisbee golf and horses are not compatible, and dogs and horses are not compatible. So the things that American Folk was thinking about weren't compatible with horses. And, the soccer fields means lots of kiddos around larger animals. I don't know that that's a great idea. And, my personal opinion and suggestion would be okay, if this is going to be an equestrian center, then let it be an equestrian center. But if we start adding other amenities beyond just the pavilions, that it puts risk in, because now you have larger numbers of people around large animals. Now, truth is, the county can't tell us, and I don't think question people can tell us how many people actually go in and out of that a day. I asked them to put traffic counters on there, but there's still a possibility of snow, so they were waiting till the end of this month to do that. And sometimes we know that when traffic counters go in, the people get excited and they do more or less than normal, right? It just happens. So we really don't know how it's used. We do know that because it's not well kept and it's not in good condition, it's used less than it should. But I think if it's going to be an equestrian center, it's hard to say we should add a lot of other things there. So that's an evolved opinion based on a couple trips out there talking with horse people.
I would not be super interested in putting a community center here. I think that there are a lot of other places we can do that in Highland, but there aren't a lot of other places we can put an equestrian park, nor would anybody, I don't think, provide the resources to do that. So, full disclosure, I have a daughter who rides, but I wish she didn't. But I think it's a unique resource. I like it where it is. I'm supportive of a rec center at some other location if it's not a huge expense to the city and the expense is more on the developer.
And I think Brittany, as you bring that up, and I've always asked this is now, how are we getting a commercial use here at the equestrian center? Because I've always thought, this to me, I've always felt that the rec center, this community rec center, it's just a fancy name for 24-hour fitness with the soccer field. And I thought we wouldn't put a 24-hour fitness with the soccer field here. And I've always wondered why we were trying to do something with Tony John's on it. And I think I've kind of been a little bit that. The one thing that I have been, I have been a horse owner. I still own pastures at this time. I did not know that this is available to me as a resident in the North Utah County. And so that's something that, if it is going to stay as an equestrian, I think it'd be appropriate for those in the area to know that that is available to them, that they could use this and maybe understand how they could access it. Now, I'd love, I've walked some of the little trails there. It would have been a nice area if you had horses to be able to get out and be able to walk them. One of your biggest issues as a horse owner has been you get closed in. And I used to be able to go up AF Canyon and I remember mountain bikes barreling down on me on my horse, and they'd kind of swear at you, and you're going, guys, my horse can't jump off the trail. You know, it just doesn't, you know, they're not going to do that. But if you also are going to be up the canyon, it's hard just to take your horse one time up the canyon, because when they get in water or other things spook them, you have to ride them down. And so I think this is a good area that if you're a horse lover and you have horses, you need an area to get their habits so you can go riding. So, you know, and so I see a need that you need to have an area where they can kind of get out and maybe ride a little bit other than just in the arena. So.
I'd like to make some comments here. I've been kind of quiet tonight, which is unusual for me, but you know, citizen surveys have a lot of support for some sort of community center or rec center, at least, and I'm a little perplexed when we always say, well, there's lots of places in Highland to build one, but we haven't really been able to find one. I don't think the equestrian park is a good place to do that. My other $64 question is just how many soccer fields do we need in this city? We've already got 11. We have a potential of adding 2 or 3 more in Mountain Ridge Park. So, you know, it seems like there should be some other recreational opportunities for other people that don't play soccer. That's just, especially when we're in a drought and you have to keep a large area wet or green, I guess, to play soccer. So, you know, I don't want to get stoned on that. I think soccer is a great sport, but just do we need 20 soccer fields? I don't know. So, you know, I would entertain the idea that we leave or tell the county to keep the equestrian center here in the open space and things, but at the same time, there needs to be some sort of discussion how to improve it and make sure that it's used, because it's in disrepair now. The county isn't maintaining it. So who's going to maintain it so that it's a good amenity for people and not kind of a hidden jewel? So, you know, I like the open space concept there, but I think we need to have a real discussion at some point about some sort of rec center, if that's what the citizens want, where we would put it, how you would finance it, just like we've done with other things. You know, again, I'd like someone to answer just how many soccer fields we need in this city. So those are my comments.
The answer is 14.
I'm maybe 17 and a half. So I guess my question is this something that we want to go in with the other 2 cities on, or sit back on and just have the county, you know, where do we go from here? Well, and then do we want to do, if we do go in with the cities, are we saying we do want to do improvements here, or just leave it as is?
You know, so, you know, Kim, I know we met with some residents on Thursday, and Mayor, you might have to give us some direction. It appears that the 3 mayors of the cities, American Fork, Lehigh, and Highland, have met. Is the thought that they want to try, is the other 2 cities kind of the same mindset? They'd like to have this as a tri-park, you know, with the 3 cities? Or are they saying, I mean, and I guess we have to decide. The county might want to get rid of it, and if they're trying to do it, it'd probably be worth at least to be part of the discussion, so we know what the ask is of the city, if financially. I mean, if they come say it's an ask of $1 million, then it makes our decision a little easier.
So here's what I know. The commissioners would not sell this unless some city stepped forward and said, we're going to support that. Now, what happened earlier was it started out with just the small parcel, and then the county indicated that they wanted to sell all of it, and then that's when the homes started appearing, and in community development partners case, it was, well, if we have to buy the whole thing, then in order and dedicate the equestrian center for public use, then we need to make money on homes to help fund that. The county has evolved, and there's pros and cons to the way it happened. One of the pros is a lot more people know about it now than they did before, right? And maybe if you're a user and you like it with not being used so much, that's not such a good thing. But there's a lot more recognition of where it is. And also, you know, you put a stake in the ground, and then you have to go from there. And so there was a stake put in the ground. The stakes moved a couple times. But I don't, at this point, don't see the county ending up selling it. I just don't know how it evolves, whether the county just forms a committee that includes the 3 cities. There's no lease agreement. Improvements are funded by the county, maybe in conjunction with the city. Bill Lee did, in talking to me, he noted that if it is a county park, then if they get tourism tax dollars, there's no need to match, right? So typically that's treated as a grant, and then you have to match it. But if it at least this is what Bill told me, so it's as good as that. But he mentioned that if the tourism tax money goes into a county thing, then there's no match needed. So I think there's all kinds of possibilities going forward. I don't know what the outcome will be. It's been apparent for a couple weeks now.
What are the other 2 cities doing?
So the other 2 cities, they put in a bid, which they invited us to participate on the day before it was due, which was not enough time for me to interact with anybody to even for the council to make a decision. But the county is not obligated to take any bid, right? They can move forward however they want. So I think there's a number of possibilities. I just can't project the future. I do know that the reason that AF and Lehigh put a bid in was to prevent it from being sold. Well, if it's not going to be sold, of course that can change, right? In a couple of years, I don't think that would come up again for a few years. But I don't know what's next. So it's not my area of responsibility, and ours would be just, are we interested in assuming the costs? And it doesn't appear that the council's disposed that way. So rather than drag things out, I think it's just a good idea to say, okay, we're out of that world and on to the next.
Let me ask a question. Are the other 2 cities wanting to keep this as open space? I mean, there isn't one of the cities that we want to annex it so we can put in high-density housing or something.
No, well, currently, Mark Johnson, so the mayors don't have any real authority other than their opinions, but Brad has indicated that leaving it largely as is where he's at right now. I think Mark is of the same opinion, and that you just evaluate any future improvements or additional amenities very carefully.
And it's in our annexation plan.
And it's currently in our annexation plan. I talked to Bill Lee and mentioned that it wouldn't change anything if the county decided to annex their property into Highland. It wouldn't cost them any more money. It wouldn't benefit us any, but the one benefit that could come out of that would be that you could use the Highland Foundation then as a holding for donations for that area, because now it's in Highland. That wouldn't change anything except for that one thing, which I think is a benefit. But we're certainly not going to get tax revenue off of it. And the county's, when the county owns it, there's nothing there. Just because it's in Highland doesn't mean it belongs to us. It just means they now can utilize our services. So if they ever needed PI, we'd have to provide it. So it actually it puts a little bit of potential cost burden on us in the future.
So Mayor, let's go back to what Commissioner or Councilmember Rodell mentioned is, I think as a council, do we want to just let it lie and let AF and Lehigh move forward with their plan that they're proposing in the county? Do we want to contact those 2 and see what their plan is, and if it's something we can participate with them on? I mean, it's right on our, we're providing water. We have residents that do, they're close to it. Or do we, is it something, where do we want to go? I think that was kind of your question is, what's the recommendation where to go?
Good. It's, there's no official action here being taken, but, if you're willing to, I'm glad the costs came out today because then we know what they're like. So if the county were to lease that to the 3 cities, we would know what our cost obligation is. What I would propose to the other cities that if we have costs, that we share them on a population basis. So ours would be roughly, what do we say, 15, 16% on that. On the other hand, the county could just say, okay, we're not, the disposal process is over, we've elected not to dispose of it in any way, shape, or form, and then they could just they could invite a committee to be formed to help manage and direct what happens in the park. And that's all that would change, right? So there would be some participation, and I would think from the local cities and the equestrian center people.
Mayor, the county would not be able to develop this, correct, unless it were annexed into a city, because until somebody agrees to provide them utilities, there's nothing they could do to develop.
Well, the county could develop it. Their policy is not to develop unless things are in the city. So that they would have to annex it in. Now, Rob, you can tell me if somebody wants to annex in as part of an annexation plan, can we say we don't want you? So we can say no, and all the cities could say no. So we have that latitude.
Okay.
So there's just, it's where it is, and it seems like,
Has the 2 cities already given the proposal to the county?
They gave a proposal, but it was, if you looked at the one that Mark Allen shared with you, it was very scant. There wasn't much on it.
And was it for them to lease the ground from the county?
I'm presuming. So, anyway, my opinion is that absent selling it, that all options are on the table going forward. There's no, and certainly
Thank you.
I have a really good relationship with the mayors of Lehigh and AF, and we would work together on something if there was a joint thing going forward. I think the data that we've provided on costs are going to be useful for them as well.
So this was just information, so do we need to do something to
No.
move it along, or do we?
I would say, based on the discussion today, that the council would not be interested in moving the rec center project forward with our help, and that essentially kills it for down there.
I think I support that, you're right.
So that's my sense of where the council is. So that issue then is a moot point. And that's okay, right? You start a project, you look at things, and you see where it goes, and you get educated. So I wish, I probably shouldn't say this, but all the conspiracy theories that were out there, they were not helpful, okay? It is not helpful because they're not accurate. So just because somebody is looking at it, it doesn't mean there's some conspiracy, right? You're just exploring things. So I don't find that helpful. The most helpful email I saw today was from a person that just talked about the property in terms of, hey, this works for horses. If horses are here, it really doesn't work for other things. So all those conversations about how all the other uses that are possible weren't as valuable to me as this one email that said, hey, was designed this way. If you start adding uses to this area, it doesn't work for horses anymore. And that was the clearest and best message, and to me, the best articulation of any argument that I heard from anybody.
So Mayor, I would recommend that if this proposal was done in October of 2020, if we start to hear some things where the county's starting to say, hey, we're starting to look this direction, that maybe we keep informed of what is starting to be abreast. I mean, I don't know that there's been a lot of concern, but I don't know how it's really county property, and I'm not sure what their plan is to move forward. And if this was given to them in October, it doesn't seem to be something that, unless you have different information saying, hey, at the end of April, they're trying to make a decision.
No, what I do know is that absent some city going with a project of any kind that involves them selling the land, that selling is not an option for them. The only one item that could be sold would be the 1 acre that Lehigh would like to use to build an underground culinary water storage tank, and that would have really, other than the construction phase, that would have no long-term impact on the park. Okay, are we done with that then?
I think so. I think we beat this horse to death.
Yeah, beat the horse to death. Pun intended. All right, on to item 6, right? Where did my item 6 go? Development agreement approval. This is legislative. Is that you, Kelly?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is a follow-up on the Highland Hollows project that we've talked about many times. It's a 68 lot subdivision located at 6531 West and 10250 North. The council approved the final plat back on February 16th. As part of the project, there are a number of public improvements associated with that require reimbursement for the developer. Primarily 3 projects. The first one is Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue is a collector road. If you recall, it's actually included in our impact fees. It includes a culvert over Mitchell Hollow. We estimate the improvements, which include the bridge crossing, pavement, curb and gutter, to be based on bids. We got 3 bids from the developer at just over $1.2 million. The cost would be reimbursed through impact fees that we've been collecting for this project. Next is 10200 North. 10200 North, for whatever reason, when the Wimbledon subdivision was built, the right-of-way and the road improvements connecting to this were actually not built to our local street standards. And so in the Wimbledon subdivision. So we've worked with the owners on the north and south side of 10200 in the Wimbledon. And what we're going to do is a modified cross-section that attaches the curb and gutter, removes the park strip, attaches the curb and gutter to the existing sidewalk, and it'll transition into 10200 into the Hollow subdivision. Estimated cost is $33,711. The final improvement is what we've talked about is the Mitchell Hollow Trail. This would include retaining walls, asphalt trail, a boardwalk over the wetlands. This was part of the agreement we made with Millhaven Development to provide the wetlands and dedicate the wetlands to the city. Estimated cost is $167,000. Just over that, we have found room in proposed budget next year. The way the development agreement is written is the council can have that discussion at a future date on whether to fund that.
So can I just add something real quick?
Yes, sir.
About a year ago, I talked with Jim Price. He's with MAG. He's their guy that oversees trail projects. And a trail extending from the Equestrian Center all the way up to the Murdoch Canal is part of the county's long-term trail plan. And so we could, and I talked to Todd about this, we could, towards the end of this year, in the fall, submit a request to develop that trail. That would more than likely get funded, but it might be 3 years, maybe 4 years out. And so whatever money we paid for this part of it could be reimbursed from that money when that becomes available from that funding. And then we do have easements, and I'm 99% sure because I looked at all the properties. I think we have easements to construct a trail from Madison all the way down to 9600. There are no trail easements between 9600 and the Equestrian Center. But our project could include the cost of the whole thing, and then we start building it according to a plan which says get reimbursed for what we did here, finish the trail down to 9600, and that's years away, so maybe the property down there develops and then we can negotiate some kind of an easement in the interim. But that's possible. We would get reimbursed, but it'll be a few years away.
So let me ask a question. When do you anticipate the trail would be built if Millhaven builds it? Would this be the final
It would be
phase or?
Sorry, Scott. It would be part of their phase 1 improvements and be completed before the subdivision was completely done.
So it would be done soon, and then we would need to pay for it soon.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor's saying we might get reimbursed in the future.
Correct.
But right now, we'd need to come up with $168,000, basically.
Correct. That's an estimate.
Would it have to be next year's budget or 2 years?
Yes, sir. Next year's budget.
Okay.
And you've factored that into your current budget plans, right?
Yes, sir. So with that, answer any other questions that you have on the agreement. It's very simple. We try to keep these simple and not complex. There is timing as it relates to the bridge, have that completed within 18 months of the recordation, which we believe is more than ample time.
So a year and a half from this summer, Madison will connect all the way through.
Will be complete. That was just to provide some buffer just in case there's delays. Their plan is to complete it as part of their phase 1 improvements. So while the contractor's on site to do it all, they don't gain any cost savings by phasing it out.
So all those road improvements happen in phase 1.
I guess we'll maybe get more information when you present the budget proposal so we can look at it. I'm just wondering how, I like the trail concept. I think it makes sense to do it now. I'm just wondering how it's going to affect our other trail maintenance that we've approved and different things.
So this would be additional funds and would not affect any of the funding that we have set aside for trail maintenance or repair.
I just have a question, just thinking back about Spring Creek Park. So by having Millhaven do this trail, is that going to be cost saving compared to if we waited 2-3 years down the road to see if we get MAG funding and bid it out ourselves?
Yes, it would. We believe it would, yes. So yeah, Scott, it would be it's separate funding and it wouldn't come out of any of the dedicated funding we have for trail maintenance.
Well, I like the idea. It's just I'm just kind of wondering how to explain it to people, because we haven't had money to really maintain or a lot of the other trails, and all of a sudden we've got $168,000 to build a new trail. I just kind of like to understand it better. Yeah.
But that's why we set up the agreement the way it is, so you can make that decision with the budget.
But I'd like to remind council that when this came up on the whole property, we were all in on yes, you're giving us this almost 6 acres of land, and we'll do the trail. So that was.
And I think some of it was just when was the timing to do that trail? And
Right. I think
that's what I'm
for
just
some
saying.
of us, my expectation was it was going to be at the end as opposed to the beginning. But I suppose that's something we could work with Millhaven on if it was a big deal.
I'm sure it'd be well used. I'm just, just want to know the funding.
And we'll see that on our next item, actually. Well, no, 2 items away. So we need a motion here to approve the development agreement. Is that what we're
Mayor,
looking for?
I move that the city council approve the development agreement with Millhaven Development LLC.
I'll second.
Motion by Kurt, second by Kim. And we're ready for a vote. Okay, so you're a yes. Okay, so yes, Tim's a yes. We can run. It passes unanimously. All right, we're on to item 7, approval of Mountain Ridge Park Phase 1 construction drawings and going to bid.
Mayor and council, in many ways, this is a little Groundhog Day-ish in that we've talked about Mountain Ridge for a long time, and so I've got some background information, but won't spend a ton of time on that just because I feel like we've talked about this quite a bit. So we've owned Mountain Ridge, the city has owned Mountain Ridge Park for years. It's that 17 acres west of Mountain Ridge Junior High on 10400. And really, so while many previous plans have been discussed, the height of the work most recently started in the fall of 2018, and there's been a number of iterations since then of the park. The current master plan as approved is what you're seeing above here right now. So parking lot, area for playground, 8 pickleball courts, pavilion, restrooms, and then 3 soccer fields. And then some flex space as well, and a future space that was originally intended for a parks maintenance building that likely won't go there at this point. So that's the current master plan as it is approved and adopted. So the priorities that we heard as we went through this long process, the priorities that we heard from council and from residents were we want an all-abilities playground, we want pickleball courts, obviously we need a parking lot and road improvements to be able to support those, and then restrooms and pavilions were musts for the park as well. With that, so how can we fund this park? So council's identified a number of funding sources previously that they were willing to use for the funding of Mountain Ridge, the construction of Mountain Ridge Park. When we sold Spring Creek, a portion of Spring Creek Park, there was about $1.4 million there.
So Aaron, as you talked the 1.4, that has to go into parks because that was part of our park bond. So no matter what, that 1.4 has to be spent in a park, correct?
Correct. Some of this money is has to be spent in certain ways, and others is discretionary up to council. So this is just what we have been communicated from council in the past that you would like to spend on Mountain Ridge. Patterson Storage sale, sale of that property. Sale of Dry Creek Park property. There's some money in a street tree account that has not been used that we could use in this park. And then, kind of to your point, Kurt, there's some qualifying monies from enterprise funds and B&C funds that we can use for certain aspects of this park. You know, I can't use enterprise funds or B&C money to put in the grass, but we can use it on the roadway. So in total, that gives us about $2.46 million, from which we have funds available to spend. So based on that, the city has been working with Blue Line Designs and Rob Donegan, who is on the line with us, to put together, okay, what can we actually afford to build with that $2.46 million? Based on the priorities we've heard and the funding that we have, this is the phase 1 that staff has come up with that we are proposing for your approval tonight. So it includes about some money set aside for construction plans and bid assistance from Blue Line. We have not finished construction plans just because we wanted this initial approval from council. The site improvements for the entire site, as well as the improvements for our 10400 North, a portion of the parking lot to service the amenities we are building, phase 1 of the All Abilities Playground, restrooms, and then 4 pickleball courts. So it would be phase 1 of the pickleball courts. In total, it's about $2.353 million. And again, this is just an estimate based that we have received. These numbers will change when we go out to bid, but that's our guesstimate as to what phase 1 will cost, which is within the budget of the $2.46 million. I know that we want to build more, and I'm hopeful that we can build more, but that will depend on grants, fundraising, and lower bid prices. So if we were to be successful in any of those areas, we've also come up with some additive elements that we can also add to the bid as potential additives. So that would include some money set aside for site improvements, and what that is will depend ultimately on which amenity we're doing. But the east parking lot near 5600 West, which I know would be very helpful to Mountain Ridge Junior High and the residents along 56. Let's see, phase 2 of the All Abilities Playground. A pavilion, right? So if you remember, the proposal just includes restrooms. So we would add a pavilion as a potential, or do the additional 4 pickleball courts as potential additives. So again, I'm hopeful we can do those, but it'll depend on alternate sources of funding. Just to kind of talk through the timing, what would happen if council approves this tonight? We'd work with Blue Line Designs to finish construction drawings and then go out to bid as soon as possible. Of course, the bids would come back to you for final approval on contract selection. Due to timing, it's likely we wouldn't start until 2022, just depending on which company we select and what their calendar is for the remainder of the year. But due to the fact that costs seem to keep going up with construction, we would recommend bidding now and locking in prices now, rather than waiting another year and potentially having prices continue to increase, I should say. So just to give you a summary, so this is with what we anticipate pricing coming in at is within what we have to spend. It gives us about a $100,000 buffer there. And then another question council asked of us is, what are the ongoing costs? What's it actually going to cost to maintain this park? So the estimate I worked with, so Todd's produced some estimates based on what we currently spend on our parks per square foot kind of a thing. And then, okay, so how does that translate to Mountain Ridge, phase 1? So the guesstimate is around $22,000 per year. Because of timing with the park and everything, that would not be in this upcoming budget year, but the following, fiscal year 23. We have money set aside one time, but this ongoing money would be money that we would need to dedicate in future budget years from growth or other sources through the general fund. And then, so ultimately the ask tonight is approval of phase 1 of the project, and then approval to move forward with construction drawings and go out to bid. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Aaron, I've got a question.
Sure.
So thanks for all your work on this, and I certainly look forward to having this park come to fruition. But I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around why the pickleball courts are so expensive, because 4 pickleball courts are equivalent to 1 tennis court. So we're spending almost $1 million to build 2 tennis courts, essentially. So what makes them so expensive?
Again, I will say that, I mean, these are just estimates, so I can't speak completely to this, but I will unmute Rob, and hopefully he can help expand that a little bit as well. And one thing to keep in mind is that, let's see, am I on the right slide? I am. The pickleball court, so we're not talking just, the pavement. We're also talking about the amenities around it, so the shade structures, that type of thing, which does add into the cost, but...
You're talking about lighting. It'd be nice to have it broken down, because some of those things could be done later, I would think.
Yes. Rob, do you want to speak to that while I look a little bit more at the bid in detail?
Yeah, sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, you're good.
I can hear myself. Yeah, again, good evening, council members. This is Rob Donegan from Blue Line Designs. Glad to be with you again and trying to get this project moving and hopefully constructed at some point. We know these numbers are large, specifically regarding the pickleball courts. As was mentioned, there's a number of factors that play into that. One is the lighting. There's hardscape, there's grading, there's sub-base material compacted under there, there's fencing, surfacing. Obviously, there's just a lot of different things that go into developing a court. I do think, to Aaron's point earlier, that these estimates could we work with a local contractor on, so it's not just numbers we pulled out of our own minds. I do believe they are very conservative in nature, and they're probably higher, and hopefully higher than what would come in when we actually bid this out. But again, I alluded to earlier, costs aren't getting any cheaper and just getting more expensive, really, I'd say every day. And that doesn't really answer your question in specifics, other than there's just a lot of things that go into those numbers.
I'd be interested in knowing what American Fork just has 6 relatively new pickleball courts. Alpine just put some in. Be interesting. I know things have gone up in price, but it'd be interesting to see how much they paid for those, because it just seems like this is a lot of money for pickleball courts.
And luckily, so I just kind of did a little bit of quick math. So around 60,000 of that is not for the pickleball courts themselves. That includes things like the fence, the gate, the shade structures around it. Which, we can probably pull out shade structures type of a thing. But ultimately, again, as Rob said, these are estimates. So when we go out to bid, hopefully it does come down, right? Right now, it's just a guess as to what this cost is. And that's why also we wanted to include those additives. So if it does come in lower, fingers crossed, then we can add some of those other items in that we would have extra funding for at that point.
It'd be helpful to me to have some of those costs itemized for the pickleball courts, because I think some of those things could be optional or done later. That's just my opinion. It just seems like that's a lot of money for pickleball courts.
Which, Aaron, I assume that when we go out to bid, that if there's things like lighting that we didn't want to do, we could scratch those out,
Could scratch that, absolutely, Mayor.
But we won't know that till we go out to bid, right?
Say your question. Go ahead, Rob.
If I jump in here. I would just say that I think I've mentioned this before, but as we put together the construction drawings, we can break these out and organize the bid documents so that, lighting's a separate line item, the courts themselves, the fencing, the shade canopies, all these things can be broken out so that when the bids are evaluated, we can say, all right, let's just do sleeving for the future lighting and not do the lighting until a later date. Let's do 4 of the courts instead of 8 of the courts. Let's do, again, foundations and sleeving for the shade canopies, but not do the shade canopies now. We structure our documents so that we have that flexibility and alternatives as we move forward.
So Aaron, I know you live out in the Eagle Mountain area. They just recently, are doing a park expansion out there, I believe, adding pickleball courts. Did you ever look at what their costs? I mean, they're in the middle of doing it right now. Did you kind of, just with Councilmember Smith, I think we've all kind of said, hold it, $800,000 or $100,000 a pickleball court seems high.
I have not heard, I keep up with this city and shamefully ignore my own city that I live in, so I don't know the cost of
It's something we
what's
can
going
look
on there.
into, because they're.
Yeah, absolutely. I
I'd just
mean,
be curious.
ultimately, this becomes a competitive bid, and so contractors are absolutely motivated to give us their best bid, right, at this point, and hopefully it will be lower than what we're looking at. So this estimate was produced, again, by a local Provo-based company, it looks like, in February of this year, so about a month and a half ago, but they were, I mean, this was an estimate, not a bid, and so I think prices will be somewhat different, but.
Well, and as a council, I think we're all hearing about what's going on with the housing. I mean, you've got your wood costs are up 3 times what they were at this time. Concrete's up, metal's up. I mean, does it stay up? We don't know. If all of us did, I think, we'd be doing something different, But that's, my concern, you look at your All Abilities Park, oh, it's only $295. But your second phase is $600, and I'm going, we're spending almost $1 million for an All Abilities Park. I'm just saying, there's some expenses here. We're going, are we being responsible? Are we being, as all this is going about? It's hard, and I know this is a park that we've been talking about forever. It's just hard to see the cost, just, $800,000 for 8 pickleball courts, $900,000 for an All Abilities Park playground. I mean, it's just, you're $1.2 million for just the road improvement. I mean, it's just.
At some point, we're at the mercy of we are at the mercy of the market, unfortunately. So, like you said, I know that while I wasn't here when this was bought, I understand that this was bought when the market was at a high as well, right? Which is kind of painful too. You don't know the future, right? And so, right now I'm telling you that I think it would be best for us to bid this now because prices are only going to go up, but I could be wrong. That's just, I wish I had that crystal ball to help and to tell you exactly what prices are going to be, but this is our best guess at this moment.
And I'll jump in and give one concrete bit of financial evidence, I guess, to support, not for these numbers, but for a project that was built last year. It was 16 courts were built. They were fully lit. Now, some complementary site improvements were not done at this time, so really it was just the courts, the fencing, the surrounding, walkways, and lighting. We did 16 courts for about $800,000. So for about the same number for 8 courts, we did 16 courts that we're saying here. And my only point there is that those are numbers from one last year. That was the design build project. A lot of the work was self-performed by the city as far as clearing and grubbing and site prep and demos and different things like that. And so comparing those numbers to what we're saying, $800,000 for 8 courts here, I believe the answer is probably somewhere in between those two numbers. I don't think we could build 16 courts for $800,000 today. But can we build 8 courts for less than $800,000? Probably. And so I'm hopeful as we put this out to bid that the numbers will be lower than what we show here.
So the motion that we're looking for here is just to go out to bid.
Approval for phase 1 and to go out to bid. Yes.
So, but it's not to spend that.
No. So
other than the costs for going up to.
Correct. So we'll go out to yes. So yes, we need $100,000. Well, so that's with bid assistance. So to pay Blue Line to finish the construction drawings, I need some. We need council's approval for that. But then you will see all of the bids. So when we get them, they'd come back to council, and staff would have a recommendation of this contractor, and this is the full package, the phase 1 that we can afford.
Okay.
Aaron, is there you mentioned that some of the funds were restricted. Is there a timeline attached to those? Like the ones that we have to spend, the one from the sale of the park or whatever?
To my knowledge, no, but.
No.
Okay.
Beyond time value of money, no.
Yeah, I was going to say some of this money, like the Tree Street account and Patterson Storage, we've had for a while, so.
you know, Nathan, maybe you can help us, or maybe Todd, as we look at maintenance on this, I mean, when I saw 22,000, I was a little surprised that we think that that's all our maintenance costs would be for this each year. I mean, where, do we have that in the budget? I mean, that's some things, you know, ongoing, you know, concerned about, we've struggled, if we listen back and what we've had concerns with over the last, you know, 4, 5, 6 years is park maintenance, you know, maintaining different open space. We're adding more open, you know, more parks here. Is it the belief of the staff that it's only $22,000 extra a year? And do we believe we'll be successful even this year in able to obtain, you know, to get the staff to help us mow? I mean, some of it's not just the financing, we seem to
Kurt,
struggle with that.
It's phase 1, and there's not very much grass in there. It's mostly hardscape. Go back and look at what's in phase 1.
Not very much.
So yes, Mayor's right. So in terms of grass to maintain, we're talking this park strip and then these 2 areas. So it's not as much. I mean, because soccer fields, right, will eat up a ton of money when those come on, for sure. But so I did it based on, so we have a you know, what we currently spend per square foot, you know, between our parks and open space funds. And so then essentially we just took that and said, okay, so we're adding this many square feet, so that's what it's going to cost. It's kind of our best guess at this point is what we feel like it's going to cost.
Hey, Aaron, can you just help me figure this out? So when we go out to bid and there's a company that has the lowest bid, does that mean that that company does the whole entire phase 1? Or what if one company could do this all abilities playground for this price, but this company could do the 4 pickleball courts for a lower price than this one? Can you piecemeal those bids?
Rob, can I have you speak to this? I'm not as...
Or also, I mean, if we see that we could do stuff in staff...
Which we absolutely have done from a staff perspective. We have, you know, on a number of projects, staff's taken over and done certain aspects of the project. And that's something we can always consider. It just comes with the trade-off of what is staff not able to dedicate their time to because they're then doing that.
That and you have to have somebody to manage it, right? So yes, that is a possibility. That's one thing we've talked about internally. A lot of times project teams will do that. They'll say, hey, you're a specialized contractor here. We can do that. That is something as we get into the bidding process that we can look at.
So it doesn't mean we're set on having this one company do the whole entire phase 1.
No,
we could piecemeal
not
it
necessarily.
if we had...
Well, I think Kim's made up a good point. I don't see a landscaper or a person that puts in pickleball courts as really a person that does site improvement. Those are almost kind of...
No, this will be a project team. We've also talked about, you know, can we do 10 Forder North as part of our road projects? You know, there's all kinds of things that we're doing to look at it, to do that, but it, you know, becomes, you know, where can we do it and where does it make sense?
I'm just saying this because Brittany and I went and talked with Cedar Hills about their Harvey Park. I think I'm the big belief, you know, if a city's done something, why don't you glean information off them? And that's what they did, right? Their finance director, catch me if I'm wrong, Brittany, but basically kind of just piecemealed the bids together, right?
And Tyler isn't even reacting.
Their finance director basically took it on.
This is Rob, by the way. I was muted before, sorry, I was going to chime in, but we can certainly, if the city has the capability to basically be the general contractor for the project, then we certainly could break this out between the different disciplines, you know, between the restroom building, between the pickleball courts, between the all abilities playground, between the landscaping and irrigation. There obviously would be a cost associated with that from the city's perspective, but if that's a cost benefit that the city sees in self-performing those services rather than paying a general contractor, that certainly is a possibility. The other approach we could take is doing a pseudo approach between those two is getting a general contractor that will do the majority of the work, you know, that goes into the roads, the sidewalks, the general site grading and preparation, and then, you know, bid the playground out separately, and bid the pickleball courts out separately, but still have a major component of the work that still basically is under the umbrella of a general contractor.
Aaron, was there a reason that we're doing pickleball before the grassed areas? Just curious.
The soccer field areas. From my understanding, based on community and council preferences, it was a preference to put pickleball in before the soccer fields.
And we do have 11 other soccer fields.
And needing
The other-
Soccer.
The other thing is that Surf Soccer has expressed an interest in helping to fund some of those fields down there. 2 or 3 of them, so that's a possibility.
I think I'm about ready to suggest that we go out for bid on this already.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, you make a motion.
Make a motion, thank you.
Yes, I am making a motion. I make motion that we, what am I motioning? That we authorize staff to complete the construction drawings for Mountain Ridge Park and go to bid for phase 1.
I'll second it.
Motion by Brittany, second by Scott. We are ready for a vote. Is your thing still not working? Okay, so your answer is okay, and now we can reveal the rest. That passes unanimously.
Can I just say, on behalf of Rob too, especially, I think little happy dance is in order for a very long project. So, thank you, council.
Yes, and let's turn Zoom on and watch Rob do a happy dance, please. All right, item 9, discussion on fiscal year budget. Tyler, now, council, this is more of a presentation to give you a high-level overview and help you understand the data that you're getting, not to dwell on any particular budget item, because that will happen when you meet with staff individually and then at our work session coming up. So,
Mayor?
We could be here all night if we go into detail.
Is there a chance before we do this that we could have a little break here?
Yes.
Like a 5-minute or something?
And a 5-minute break would be in order, and I so move that happens absent any opposing opinions. Hearing no opposing opinions, a 5-minute break is declared. Okay, we are now re-adjourned. Tyler's up to bat, and you and a closed session are the last thing standing between us and rest. Be warned. Dinner.
I'm not standing in between anybody's rest. Feel free to go to sleep right now. Mayor and Council, appreciate the opportunity to address you, and excited to present to you kind of a kickoff of what's already been tremendous work. Appreciate the work of my colleagues. This has truly been collaborative and will continue to be collaborative as we go through this process with you. So here, the documents that we've passed out to you today, one, there's a high-level summary on the overall revenue and expenses projected for fiscal year 22 that we're requesting by fund. And then, of course, the detail that Kurt, I know, is very excited to read in complete and entirety, all 67 pages of that. So some things that we wanted to point out to you here. Imagine yourself, you're part of the dating game, right? Go back to the dating game.
It's a real stretch. It's a long time ago.
Well, you know, our good friend Kelly here is...
Oh, yes, she's still in the...
Right. And you could think of this song, I only have eyes for you. Don't sing that yet, please, okay? Because these numbers will change, okay? This is the first draft, and we'll show you here at the end of the presentation the schedule we intend to follow, but this will be an iterative process. We want your feedback. I want this to be a conversation as we go through the process. So please do not fall in love with these figures yet. Some other key items. That's it.
We're done. Good.
That wanted to bring to your attention as you go through, of course, welcome any questions that you have and feedback and input. With regard to the general fund and revenues, we're projecting, of course, some increases. We're projecting some conservative increases there with respect to property tax and then sales tax. We have seen, if we rewind a year ago, nobody, I think, would have expected the windfall in sales tax that we have seen. So we are projecting an increase, but want to be conservative in case some of that level of increase.
So if we had an increase, let's say $500,000 in 2021 budget, are you saying that you're thinking you're going to have another 3% above that 500,000?
So that is 3% above the 21 budget that we amended, that council amended back in January. So that's 3% above the $2.9 million that we adjusted to at that point.
So in our normal year is, you said 6 to 7% increase, right? We had a bumper crop this year, so it kind of makes sense that maybe the bumper is less next year.
Right. In case, for instance, some of the online sales, if folks go back to stores and whatnot in their own locations, that certainly could change. We are seeing trends currently headed towards that $3.3 billion roughly. But that's based on 4 months of data at the time when we made those estimates due to the lags of sales tax. So that certainly can be adjusted as we get into the year. If at mid-year we feel that there's the trend is continuing to be the bumper crop, then that can be increased. So those are ongoing revenues. Some one-time revenues that we think are of note. Cemetery fund will allow us to transfer, we anticipate, in excess of $200 to the general fund. Building permits from development, we're expecting quite a volume there. And then impact fees, also related to development, will reduce the burden on the general fund here temporarily for bond payments. And so we'll see what we would normally have to pull out of the general fund. We're estimating about $386,000 that can stay in the general fund for that year.
Awkward.
Help me out there, Aaron. Thanks. All right. Staff are important here, getting the work done. So we're including a merit increase of 3%. We're tentatively estimating an increase in benefits costs of 10%, which is typical. Therefore, for estimating purposes, we do expect that there's a good possibility that could come in lower. In some ways, the pandemic has reduced usage, not just for the city, but in the industry across, so that when those bids come in, we're hopeful those could be lower. For the time being, I'm carrying that at 10% estimate. A couple of positions here specific to the general fund, building inspector to keep up with the additional development, and a part-time code enforcement position that we're proposing. That's been a particular need in helping to get a good fit for long-term sustainability with that staff. There are some other needs with regards to staffing that we'll discuss in greater detail here in a couple of weeks related to utility-related enterprise funds as well.
So I really am supportive of the part-time code enforcement officer, because you have to hire a person that's good at that, and when you put that burden on a current staff member, it's not a happy experience. It's a good experience, but it's not one that leads to longevity of employment.
Good is a relative term.
Well, let's say valuable experience. We'll put it that way.
In my banking days, I am a recovering banker. We had lenders who sometimes tried to be collections agents as well, and we're put in that situation. That's really hard to wear both of those hats, right? And not that code enforcement is necessarily bill collecting, but you want to find a good fit and somebody that's going to enjoy that. So appreciate your support on that. All right. Some particular needs with regard to the fleet. Public Works, a number of vehicles there that we're including. Lone Peak Public Safety, we've met a number of times with the chiefs and with staff, including Alpine, and we're also including a 3% merit increase, anticipating similar increases in benefits costs. At the end of the day, we're putting a placeholder there for the city's assessments of 2%, and we'll finalize those and refine those here in the next month or so.
So a couple of things why Tyler's going is the dump trucks for the cemetery, just so you know. And this is what we've talked a lot about, trying to be proactive. And so we're trying to adjust what we're doing to be proactive, and these are the things that you're seeing us do.
So instead of us in the middle of winter saying, we're stuck with snow plows.
And Jacobson is one of our big lawn riding mowers, is what that is.
Okay.
It's a Jacobson mower.
Thanks, Nathan.
What's a skid steer?
It's a small, small piece of equipment that you can,
skid a steer with?
Yeah, skid a steer with. No, no kidding. Yeah, Bobcat.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
One thing that we do want to point out, and this is more of a timing matter than anything else, the agreement between Highland and Alpine for the Lone Peak Public Safety District was revised last year and includes a provision that requires the approval of both city councils, not just the board, but both city councils, if the change in the budget year over year is more than the increase or decrease in property tax. Now, lots of math terminology there, right? In any case, there's not a whole lot of room there for that adjustment. So we do anticipate that that approval will be required on the part of both Highland and Alpine City Councils. And so the board will be meeting a couple of times in April to accommodate that and make sure that we have the information in front of the City Council appropriately. As far as items that we do want to keep in mind that are not necessarily included in the budget here, parks capital needs, repairs. We have received estimates of approximately $4.1 million. That includes $1 million of work between Heritage and Highland Glen Parks that may be considered. Park construction that Aaron talked about earlier this evening, as well as Beacon Hills, might be a consideration. Building maintenance and infrastructure are also ongoing considerations there that may warrant some funding. One final thing here before
Can you go back to the park? So outside of Heritage and Highland Glen, which they're looking at $1 million, we have another $3 million in projected capital or major projects for the other parks. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so those are maintenance. That's playground replacement. That is softball replacement, or if they have a pavilion that needs replacement.
Okay.
That's ADA ramps to the playgrounds if we need those type of things.
Okay.
The American Rescue Plan. This is CARES Part 2, if you will. The city, we anticipate receiving approximately $2 million. And that would come in two different distributions. One that could come anytime between now and September, depending on when the federal government sends the money to the state. And then because our population is less than 50,000, the state then sends the money to us. The second distribution would be no sooner than 1 year later. So depending on when the first distribution occurs would determine when the second could occur.
So Tyler, are those equal distributions or are they be unequal? Do you have any idea?
The unequal.
I mean, each $1 million, or is one 500,000, the other one's 1.5?
I believe that they would be equal distributions.
Equal,
yes.
okay.
Yep. The funds are to be used by the end of 2024. So here we have a few years to use those funds, which we're grateful for. A little longer runway than the 2 months that we had at the end of the CARES once some clarification was received. Now, with regard to how the funding can be used, it can be used to respond to the public health emergency, and specifically to respond to economic impacts. So that could be supporting business, or if there's a determination that homes or whatnot were negatively impacted, that's a possibility. Provide premium pay to eligible workers, or grants to eligible workers who work for an agency. For clarity's sake, an eligible worker is essentially defined by the city, and it's pretty broad. Number 3, could compensate for a reduction in revenue due to the pandemic. And just to reiterate, that does not apply to Highland, where we actually saw increases in revenue coming in. Another option, making investments in infrastructure, water, sewer, or internet infrastructure there as well. So some things to keep in mind.
Does that include roads then? Does infrastructure include roads?
Roads was not specifically named, so there may be clarification that comes through, but that has not been named in the literature that we've.
But under the current language, we could put in a water pump or like a well, or we could do some sewer projects like your neighborhood could use to fund that.
The legislation passed at the national level specifically prohibits states or otherwise adding additional requirements. So we're hopeful that there is little red tape added to that funding. Again, it does have to pass through the state due to our size, but we're hopeful that we should see that here soon. So with regard to the timing here, we've distributed these documents to you. Welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you have and anything that you might want to see as a group for the work session on the 13th. Please take an opportunity to reach out and be happy to meet with you. That council work session on the 13th, we anticipate adopting the tentative budget as required by state statute the beginning of May. Possibly doing a public open house at the beginning of May as well. We'll see where that really rolls out due to the pandemic. Another possible work session on June 1st, and then adoption in mid-June. So looking forward to this process with you, and want to provide information that's helpful and digestible and meaningful as you make these important decisions of how to allocate funds that have been trusted to you. So, any questions?
So I haven't had time, of course, to read through the budget, but this American Rescue Plan, you think you'll get $1 million approximately by September. Is that included in the revenue here? When I briefly went through it, I didn't see it.
It is not.
So that's all separate?
Correct. And of course, one-time funding there, but no, we've not yet included that due to uncertainty of timing and making sure we understand the requirements in doing that.
Do you think we'll have a better understanding by the time we go through this budgetary process?
I believe so, yes. We're March, we'll have a couple more months down the road. The requirement, the federal government has to send the money to the state within 60 days of passage. So that clock started on March 11th. So March into May. The state then should send the money to us within 30 days, but they can request an extension of up to 120. So ultimately dependent on how long the state wants to take, and if they receive approval from the federal government to delay.
Yeah, I would think the cities would like it to come in so they can budget with it.
Right.
I mean, we're in the middle of the budgetary process, so, okay.
Great. If there's nothing else?
For Tyler?
So Tyler, if we put an internet booster in the pavilion at Mountain Ridge Park and allow people who play pickleball to be able to access their internet, and also inside the restrooms in the Ability Park, with that classified to be able to use?
That's creative.
It's just a facetious, okay?
Great idea.
I'll go for it. Thanks, Tyler.
Actually, it's not a bad idea.
I think people would like to have it.
Yeah.
I would say that's in order.
End song, end with a
Okay.
song.
Thank you.
All right. So, mayor and staff communication items. We got future meetings listed up. Does anybody have any updates they'd like to share? No updates? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session for the reason outlined in the agenda.
I'll make that motion. I move that we adjourn and move into closed session.
It's been moved that we adjourn to closed session so that we may temporarily recess to convene a discussion on character, professional competence, or mental or physical